Chapter 107. I'm just saying, you don't have to follow me all the time. Eric drove and glanced helplessly at Drew, who was leaning on the passenger seat. Drew snorted, chewed a few times, and continued to play with the handheld in his hand. The beeping sound drifted in the car. Jenny will return to Los Angeles at the end of the month, and she will probably move in with us. Drew's voice was a little louder, but she didn't mind. Drew was not optimistic about the relationship between Eric and Jennifer Aniston from the beginning. Eric had a very strong personality. Although he usually looked amiable and seemed to be able to negotiate anything, once he became arrogant, he would not allow others to go against his will. And Jennifer Aniston was so stubborn. She had a strong self-esteem mixed with an inferiority complex. In the short term, it might be okay to get along, but when there was friction, both sides would accommodate each other. But after a long time, the situation of mutual tolerance could no longer be maintained. Not to mention, Eric was such a playboy. It would be strange if Jennifer Aniston could tolerate it. Drew often fantasized that she might be the most suitable one for Eric. She could tolerate and even indulge his strength, his playfulness, his everything. In order to get along better with him, Drew, who was dizzy whenever she read, deliberately read a lot of books on personality psychology, just to understand him better. Although she loved him, the kind that could give up everything for him, she knew that he would not belong to her in the end. It was really sad to think about it. The reason why she pestered him today was not that she was jealous. Okay, she was a little bit jealous. But more than that, she just wanted to show her existence to him. She knew that he must understand. He was so smart, how could he not understand? She just wanted a little more. She was not greedy at all. It was Drew's first time at the headquarters of Firefly. Although she grew up in front of cameras, she did not know much about the internal operations of the film company. She was full of curiosity about everything here, so she specifically asked a female staff member who worked overtime on the weekend to show her around. She walked around the dubbing and editing rooms and played with the equipment curiously. But after all, Firefly was not a big film company. It took her more than 10 minutes to walk around, and then she stayed in the small screening room to watch the videotapes. She did not continue to harass Eric. After he asked someone to add the name given by Drew to the audition list, Eric looked through the list of actors who had passed the first round of screening. After looking through a few pages, he saw that the actors on the list basically met the screening criteria he listed. As for whether or not there were any private goods in it, there was no need to guess. Even he had added a lot of favors in it, let alone other people in the company. He was even certain that in the future auditions, even the audition order arranged by the staff would be fishy, but as long as there were no major mistakes, it would be fine. Would it be unfair to those actors who had no connections but had good acting skills? Sorry, there was no fairness in this world. As the company grew, Eric could not hold all the power in his hands. Some of the secondary roles' casting rights would slowly be handed over to others. The person in charge of casting wouldn't joke about his career. Once the selected actor didn't meet the requirements and affected the filming, the person in charge would most likely be fired. Therefore, those actresses who were delusional enough to accompany the assistant director to get the role would most likely end up with nothing if their acting skills weren't up to par. After reviewing some of the audition list, Eric was not in a hurry to leave. Since he was here, he looked at the detailed budget of Dark War, Island Horror, and Scent of a Woman. Because Columbia was responsible for investing in Dark War, Eric set the budget at $40 million. For a non-special effects movie, this was a super high-cost production. However, Eric did not intend to save money for Columbia. If he could not spend it all, Columbia would not transfer the remaining money to his card. Therefore, Eric shifted his focus to the actors. The female character in charge of Interpol directly invited the alien queen, Sigourney Weaver, to make a guest appearance. The other party agreed. Of course, the guest appearance fee was not low. It did not matter, as it was not his money. As for the chief inspector of the Major Crimes Division, Huang Chifa, who stole the limelight until he had no friends, Eric had his eyes on Joe Pesci, the actor who played the role of the stupid thief Harry in the original Home Alone. When Eric was preparing for Home Alone, he had thought of inviting Joe Pesci, but unfortunately, the budget was insufficient, so he could only make do with a TV actor. In the end, That actor's role was snatched by the newcomer Matthew Perry. In the new version of Home Alone, the eye-catching character was no longer the old thief, but the little thief. Joe Pesci happened to receive an invitation for another blockbuster movie, Lethal Weapon 2, which was invested in by Warner. It was also a popular movie series in Warner, and there were 5 movies in the parallel universe. While Joe Pesci was hesitating between the 2 movies, he received the offer from Firefly, so he did not hesitate anymore. Of course, Eric also held a special audition for Joe Pesci, and the results were good. Joe Pesci had a very funny voice like Donald Duck, and he had a natural comedic talent. He just did not know if Tom Hanks, who was equally good at acting, would be overshadowed in the future. As for the other supporting roles in Dark War that had not been chosen yet, Eric had also set the standard for second or third tier actors. If they did not have the acting experience of 2 or 3 movies and no connections, they would be directly rejected and not even qualified for the audition. On the other hand, Eric personally invested in Smelling Women and Island Horror with a much smaller budget. The investment budget for Smelling Fragrance was set at $10 million. Al made this movie mainly for the Oscars, so he only received $3 million. As for Island Horror, its budget was only $5 million. Jonathan Demme's director's fee was $500,000, and Virginia's salary was the same as Julia's in Wind and Moon, $300,000. Because all the scenes of the movie were set in an old English house, the remaining funds were more than enough to complete the shooting. After reading the long budget of the 3 movies, Eric stretched and looked at his watch. It was already 6 in the evening, so he got up and was about to leave. He asked the staff who stayed behind and learned that Drew had left early. The little girl was so tactful that Eric felt embarrassed not to go home at night. After calling Virginia to inform her that he would not be going over tonight, Eric drove back to the mansion in Beverly Hills. The girl was obviously happy to see him back, but she still ate takeout for dinner. Eric had been busy the whole afternoon and was too lazy to cook. Drew had no talent in cooking at all, so it was not like she couldn't cook. Although she was not stupid to the point where she couldn't distinguish between salt and sugar, or sauce and vinegar, the food she made was hard to swallow. "Eric, why don't we hire a chef?" Drew was obviously tired of eating takeout pizza, so she suggested on a whim at the table. Eric cut a piece of pizza and stuffed it into his mouth. He nodded and said, "It's best to hire a few maids. I prefer Japanese uniforms. What about you?" "I like..." Drew just started to say something, then she shut her mouth and glared at Eric. "You're really a possessive male creature. Even if the territory is empty, you don't allow anyone of your kind to appear. TSK, TSK. Eric looked at the girl curiously. "I didn't expect you to say something so reasonable. I really underestimated you." Drew pouted, lowered her head, and continued to eat dinner, ignoring Eric. Chapter 108. Motorola agreed to pay $3 million in sponsorship fees, but the premise is that the male leads must be Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks, who were previously revealed. Lamborghini's sponsorship offer this time is a one-time payment of $800,000. The other party has learned their lesson and no longer accepts the rule of fluctuating sponsorship fees based on box office sales. As for the others, Ray-Ban Sunglasses offered $500,000, asking for more than 5 seconds of close-up shots with the Ray-Ban Sunglasses logo in the movie. Hershey's Chocolate and Candy Company also offered $500,000 to buy out the product placement of the box bomb. In the conference room, Jeffrey's tone was filled with excitement as he read out the offers of the various sponsors who were interested in buying product placement advertisements one by one. In fact, Eric also had the same document in his hands, but Jeffrey couldn't help but read it out loud. He was too happy. If all the offers on the document were finalized, it meant that Firefly had made a profit of more than $6 million before the movie even started shooting. In this era, there were more than 500 movies in Hollywood that had the opportunity to appear on the cinema screens every year. But even if the peripheral profits such as videotape broadcasting rights were included, there would be no more than 50 movies that made a profit of $6 million. Eric reviewed his own opinions on the advertising offers one by one, then closed the folder and handed it to Jeffrey. "Okay, Jeffrey, You're so happy with just a sponsorship of more than $6 million US? Only more than $6 million US. Jeffrey raised his head in dissatisfaction and repeated Eric's words. He retorted, Eric, do you have the ability to find me another movie that can get $6 million US in sponsorship? There isn't one now, but it doesn't mean there won't be one in the future. Eric spread his hands. Maybe in another 10 or 20 years, the movie will be able to recoup most of its cost with product placement advertisements alone. We don't have to wait 10 or 20 years at all. Jeffrey said with some emotion, if it was the last movie, Pretty Woman, we would have already recouped our cost with the amount of sponsorship we received. There's no objection to that assumption at all. Eric suddenly thought of another very important matter. Did you tell the sponsors to keep it a secret before the movie is released? Of course I won't forget, Jeffrey replied. I've already explained the pros and cons to them. Before the movie is released, the sponsors won't reveal a single word. Eric nodded in relief. He stood up and asked, That's good. Today's audition is about to start. Do you still want to come? Forget it, it's too torturous. I'm not going, Jeffrey hurriedly refused. Originally, he quite enjoyed the producer's power over the actors. Unfortunately, after sitting behind the audition table for several days, repeatedly asking questions and watching the audition actors' performances over and over again, his sense of superiority slowly disappeared. All that was left was boredom and exhaustion. The auditions over the past few days had also made Eric's head spin. This was mainly due to the audition for the role of Dark War. For each role, there were hundreds of actors who qualified for the audition, and this was the result of a large number of screening. In addition, some actors who were eliminated from the audition also tried various ways to get a second audition opportunity from time to time. In short, it was a lot of trouble. Eric had already decided to hand over the auditions for Island Horror and Smelling Women to the two directors, Jonathan Demme and Martin Braister. He planned to let the two directors choose 10 or fewer candidates first, and then he would go through the third round of auditions. It would be much easier that way. The only thing that was better than the auditions for various villains a few days ago was that today's audition was for the role of Yo-Yo, the girl Andy met on the bus. She was the third party who was teased by his gay friends or fake gay friends as the third party who came between Andy and Sean's pure and beautiful relationship. Of course, this was just a joke. Although the two protagonists in Dark War were very cool when they acted, overall, it was a sad and cold story. If the chief inspector of the Key Case Investigation Unit, Huang Chifa, was the touch of happiness in the story, then Yo-Yo was the touch of warmth. In a story, there were all kinds of emotions, like joy, anger, sorrow, and joy, just like life. Eric had set the standard for this role to be between 18 and 30 years old, a beautiful woman with the temperament of a workplace beauty. Therefore, today's audition process would be very pleasing to the eye. A girl walked out of the audition room and gently closed the door. After she turned around, the expression on her face quickly disappeared. She ignored the curious gazes in the corridor and carried her bag to her agent, who was waiting not far away. The two whispered a few words before walking out. The staff walked out and read out another name. Another girl was called in, and the next one was herself. Gwyneth Paltrow took out the makeup mirror in her bag and checked her makeup again. She was born in 1972 and was only 17 years old. According to the standards set by Eric, Gwyneth would not even have the opportunity to audition. However, this was not a problem for her, because she knew Drew, who was very close to Eric Williams. Both of their godfathers were Steven Spielberg. That little B***TCH was said to have been kept by Eric Williams. She was becoming more and more useless. Gwyneth's father was a producer, and her mother was a famous film and television actress. Her family background was 100 times better than Drew's. She had looked down on Drew, who pretended to be cute because of his young face. Even at the Spielberg family gatherings, Gwyneth rarely greeted Drew. She preferred to interact with people of the same age as her family background, which would be helpful for her future development. However, when she found out that there was a chance to work with big names like Eric Williams, Tom Cruise, and Tom Hanks, Gwyneth, who was preparing to join Hollywood, was immediately tempted. If she could get this role, Her career in Hollywood would have a higher starting point than those small actors who had worked hard for many years. Therefore, without hesitation, Gwyneth immediately contacted Drew, hoping that he could help her get an audition opportunity. Although she was not close to Drew before, they did not have any grudges. That little B*TCH was coaxed by a few words of mine and agreed. She was so easy to fool. Gwyneth thought with contempt. In less than 5 minutes, the girl who had just entered walked out with a disappointed expression. The eyes of all the actresses waiting in the corridor lit up. There was one less contender. Next, Miss Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth hurriedly stood up, took a deep breath, and adjusted her state of mind. She walked into the audition room with a faint smile and sat down on the chair. She looked straight ahead confidently and looked at the blond young man sitting in the middle with his head lowered, writing something. That was Eric Williams. He was indeed handsome. Gwyneth's heart raced. She could not help but wonder if he would invite her to dinner. Perhaps she should reject him first to show her restraint. Men were too easy to get. She was very confident in her looks. After more than 10 seconds, the young man looked up with a smile. "Hello, Miss Paltrow. Introduce yourself first." After a brief exchange of glances, Gwyneth could tell that Eric Williams definitely knew who she was. This made her a little excited. It seemed that the little B*TCH was still useful. At least he didn't treat her as a stranger. "Hello, everyone. My name is Gwyneth Paltrow. I'm 17 years old this year and graduated from..." After a short self-introduction, Eric asked, "Miss Paltrow, according to the information, you have no experience in acting before. How do you think you got this role?" Gwyneth still had a smile on her face. She had prepared herself for this question, so she answered unhurriedly, "Because I was born into an acting family. My mother is an actress. When I was very young, I started helping my mother rehearse her lines. Under such circumstances, I've always maintained a strong interest in acting. Since middle school, I've always been the backbone of the school's drama club. I've participated in many famous stage plays and accumulated a wealth of acting experience." After Gwyneth finished speaking, the judges opposite her nodded at the same time. "Miss Paltrow, do you believe in love at first sight?" The other person threw out another question. Gwyneth was stunned for a moment. She had no idea why the other party asked this question. As a Westerner who was prone to hormonal sparks, Gwyneth believed in love at first sight. However, she felt that if she answered the question like that, it would make her seem rash. The other person did not rush her. Gwyneth thought for half a minute before saying, "No, I don't believe in love at first sight. Compared to that, I'm more willing to accept sincere feelings developed through long periods of interaction." Chapter 109. Eric listened to her and didn't say anything. He lowered his head and made a note on the file. This reaction made Gwyneth a little uneasy. She felt that her answer should have been appropriate. However, the person opposite her didn't give her time to think. After asking a few more questions, the performance began. The staff brought over a bench that could seat 2 people. An assistant explained, "Miss Paltrow, the scene you're going to perform is like this. On the bus, a strange man suddenly sits next to you. He's very handsome, and a woman's heart will flutter when she sees him. However, you see a gun in his open collar. The man holds you hostage and wants you to pretend to be a couple to fool the police. You don't dare to resist and can only let him do what he wants. Miss Paltrow, you don't have any lines. You can only rely on your expression and body language to express your emotions. You have 1 minute to prepare." No lines at all. This is too difficult. This thought popped into Gwyneth's mind. However, she knew that she had no other choice. She quickly adjusted her mentality and prepared for the performance. A minute later, Gwyneth sat down on the bench and indicated that she was ready. The assistant reminded her that the music had stopped and the performance was over. At the same time, another staff member pressed on the player. A light piano piece began to play. The piece was the piece that repeatedly appeared during the bus encounter in the original version. It was called Speechless Love. In his previous life, This piece was suspected of plagiarizing a piece by the Greek musician Vangelis in 1995. The original soundtrack wasn't released. Now that Eric had copied this piece, there wouldn't be any copyright issues. In the future, he could release the original soundtrack without any qualms. Gwyneth sat there quietly. After a while, a staff member sat down next to her. Gwyneth frowned slightly. She turned to look at the man next to her. Her gaze landed on the man's open collar. There was a gun there. Fear immediately appeared on Gwyneth's face. Her body made an obvious movement to hide. Eric frowned slightly. Gwyneth's expression was too exaggerated. However, he didn't interrupt her. The two of them continued to perform. As the music continued, the staff member who was acting as an extra put his arm around Gwyneth's shoulder and said, "Just don't make a sound." Gwyneth's body stiffened as she stared straight ahead. From Eric's vision, he could see that the girl's hand on her knee was trembling slightly. The staff member took off his glasses and put them on Gweenie's, but the girl still did not react. She was like a puppet. There was supposed to be an action of taking out earphones, but because it was an impromptu performance, it was omitted. "Come closer," the staff member said again. Gwyneth leaned on the man's shoulder with an aggrieved expression. A moment later, Eric made a gesture and someone immediately stopped the music. Gwyneth knew that her performance was over. She quickly straightened her back and smiled as she took off her sunglasses and returned them to him. "Miss Paltrow, thank you very much for your audition. You can leave now. We will inform you of the results as soon as possible." It's over just like that?" Gwyneth couldn't help but ask. Eric nodded and gestured for her to leave. Gwyneth had no choice but to take her handbag and leave the audition room. After closing the door, the girl immediately put away her expression and coldly walked through the crowd waiting for the audition. In the audition room, a few people quickly started to discuss. Alan Fissman, who was sitting beside Eric, asked, "What do you think, Eric?" Eric drew a cross behind Gwyneth's name. He didn't have any feelings for beauties like Gwyneth, not to mention that her acting wasn't very good. He casually explained, "No, her emotions are monotonous and her expression is superficial. It's very fake. Cotter, get ready to call the next one." Nick Frank, who was beside him, reached out to stop Cotter. "Eric, it's my turn now. Hey, I'm only 3, okay? Didn't we agree on a rotation of 10? The man who had just been an extra immediately retorted. Nick showed a pained expression and said, "Royce, I think you should stop acting. You're so ugly. The 3 girls just now were all affected by you and didn't perform well at all. This is simply killing someone's career. If it was Audrey Hepburn, even if there was a gorilla sitting next to her, she would still be able to perform. Royce, you finally admit that you're not even as good-looking as a gorilla." Royce, who was indeed a little rough, but not ugly at all, said furiously, "Nick, if you continue to mock me like this, I'll tell everyone about what happened at the Brady bar that night." "Don't you dare." Eric slapped the table gloomily to stop the quarrel between the two. Nick was Eric's cameraman, and Royce was now the assistant director. The two of them were originally from Jeffrey's wife's team and were very good friends. Such small quarrels happened every 2 to 3 days, so Eric wasn't worried that the two would really get into a conflict. But it was too annoying to continue arguing like this. The cause of the quarrel was the audition. Today's audition was full of beautiful women. Eric didn't find extras, but all the men present to play the role of Andy the Robber. It was a little benefit for the crew who had been working with him for so many days. He didn't expect that he had underestimated the hormonal restlessness of this group of animals. At the beginning of the audition, there was a very sexy Latin girl with a full body. When it was time for a cameo, it was Eric's assistant, Alan Fissman's turn, but Nick directly jumped up. Because there were outsiders present, Alan could only stare. "Stop arguing, I'm having a headache. Royce, continue." "The rules are unchanged. If you quarrel again, I'll find extras. No one will act." Eric still had a lot of prestige, or maybe the threat at the end worked. Both Nick and Royce immediately shut up and just gave each other the middle finger. After receiving Eric's signal, Cotter went out and called for the next audition. It wasn't until they walked out of Firefly's office that Gwyneth suddenly reacted. "Ah, I should have thought of it." Gwyneth waved her hands frantically and kicked the trash can next to her, making a muffled thud. She finally realized why Eric asked about love at first sight. Combined with the performance just now, it was clearly a scene of two strangers meeting and falling in love at first sight. She thought she was smart enough to say that she didn't believe in love at first sight. She was so stupid. Also, during the performance just now, she only cared about showing fear and didn't show any emotion of love at first sight. Right, the staff seemed to have reminded her that the strange man was very handsome and could make a woman's heart flutter at first glance. It was all the staff's fault for being an extra. He was obviously ugly, but he still wanted to act as a handsome guy. If Eric Williams was sitting next to her, she would definitely feel her heart flutter. Gwyneth gritted her teeth as she thought about it. For some reason, she transferred her disappointment and anger to Drew. It was all that little B***TCH's fault. She lived in Eric Williams' house, so she must have seen the script of Dark Warfare. Gwyneth had even asked her about the contents of the script. If that little B***TCH had told her anything, she wouldn't have been unprepared. After venting her anger, Gwyneth happened to pass by a phone booth. "Alright, maybe I can contact Drew Barrymore and see if he can help me get another audition. Next time. I will definitely be well prepared next time. I won't perform as badly as I did this time." Gwyneth didn't consider the time at all. Under normal circumstances, Drew should be in class. She looked for the address book in her bag, stuffed a coin into the payphone, and dialed Drew's dorm number. After a few beeps, the call was connected. "Hello." A sleepy girl's voice sounded from the other end, as if she hadn't woken up yet. Gwyneth changed into a friendly tone. "Hi, Drew, it's me, Gwyneth. Hee, it's already 10, and you're still sleeping. I envy you. It's like this, I participated in the audition today, but I feel like I didn't perform to my full potential. Can you help me ask Mr. Williams to give me another audition?" "Okay. I'll wait for your good news. Let's have dinner together this weekend. I know a great Italian restaurant on Sunset Boulevard." "That's great. Okay, that's all, bye." Gwyneth smiled until she heard the busy tone from the other end of the call. She slapped the phone back and said with a hint of contempt and jealousy, "Sleeping in the middle of the day, you must have gone out to fool around last night. I hope you'll be sold to an African mine by Eric Williams one day. Let's see if you can still keep that seductive face of yours." Chapter 110. Firefly Corporation's Audition Room. After a whole morning of auditions, there were a few actresses that he had a good impression of, but none of them made Eric's eyes light up. Therefore, the selected actresses could only be used as backups. If they could not find someone more suitable in the end, they would have to go through a third round of auditions. Dark War was not originally a Hollywood movie, so there was no reference for the actors. Eric could only choose according to his own imagination. Other than the roles of Cruise, Hanks, and Joe Pacey, Eric cared the most about the role of Lady Encounter. Therefore, the auditions began after most of the main characters and supporting roles had been confirmed so that he could slowly choose. This was also the role that received the most applications after the public auditions for Dark War. Although there were not many scenes, it was the female lead. Therefore, it even attracted the interest of a few A-list actresses. Because there were not many scenes, a few A-list actresses who expressed their intention to participate in the movie agreed to participate for free, just to make their presence known in this highly anticipated movie. Unfortunately, Eric rejected them after looking at their information because there was no one he liked. The current cast of Dark War was already very strong, so there was no need to accommodate A-list actresses who did not fit the image to add flowers to the brocade. He felt that Lady Encounter had to be able to make people's eyes light up. Only then would she be able to leave a deep impression in the short period of time she appeared on screen. This was something that the actress in his previous life did not do. She only made the audience remember that there was such a warm encounter on the bus in Dark War, but the actress herself was not remembered. Although that actress had acted in a lot of films in the year after Dark War to make her presence known, she was still not very popular. The auditions in the afternoon were still not very popular, but there were a few more names on the backup list. After a busy day, Eric returned to his mansion in Beverly Hills. In the empty mansion, the television in the living room was playing the news program out of boredom. He busied himself in the kitchen for a while, preparing a simple dinner, then went to the living room to slowly enjoy it. Eric didn't like being alone. In his previous life, he was a very lively person. Unfortunately, after coming to this world, Eric inexplicably fell in love with this kind of atmosphere. This kind of situation calmed his heart and allowed him to calmly think about many things. He was sure that everything was not a dream, but real. That was why Eric had rejected Drew's suggestion to hire a few servants last time. Of course, it was also possible that there was some kind of primitive and instinctive territorial consciousness hidden deep in his personality. After dinner, he was cleaning up the tableware when he heard the phone ringing in the living room. He picked it up, but the owner's voice did not immediately come from the other end. Instead, there was the sound of a group of girls playing. Eric could vaguely hear Drew's voice. He smiled and waited patiently for a while. In the girls' dormitory, Drew was in high spirits. She was a typical night owl. As she had no plans to sneak out to play tonight, Drew was still wearing her pajamas. After knowing that Drew was calling Eric, the girls in the girls' dormitory came over curiously. They had always been curious about the relationship between Drew and Eric. Drew punched and kicked the group of gossipy girls and chased them out. After locking the door, she returned and picked up the phone again. "Eric, it's me. I want to ask about Gwyneth Paltrow's audition today." Eric said honestly, her performance wasn't very good. "Drew, did Gwyneth ask you to ask?" "Yes." When the girl heard Eric's comment, her expression did not change at all. "No wonder after the audition today, she called me in a hurry and wanted me to give her another audition. So that's the reason. I think the result will be the same if she tries again. Also, her image is too different from the character's setting. Otherwise, we can let her try again. Anyway, this role doesn't require much acting skills. Drew, are you close to Gwyneth? If that's the case, I can help her look for roles in future movies. Forget about Dark War." No, of course not." Drew quickly rejected. "My relationship with her is very ordinary." Eric was puzzled. "Aren't both of you Spielberg's goddaughters? That's the only thing we have in common." Drew's tone became a little tired. "Gwyneth's father is a movie producer, and her mother is a big star. She has lived a carefree life since she was young. When I saw her a few times at her godfather's house, Gwyneth was as proud as a princess, surrounded by a bunch of little kids. Unlike me, who was only a few months old when my mother took me to shoot commercials to make money for the family. Actually, Gwyneth looks down on me. If she didn't need my help this time, she would never have taken the initiative to contact me." Drew's simple words made people feel a little sad. Eric, who was leaning against the back of the sofa and standing by the phone, sighed softly and said, "Girl, it's different now. You don't have to accommodate anyone anymore. You're a real princess now. The next time you meet someone you hate, just roll your eyes at them. Don't worry, I'll back you up if anything happens." Drew, who was in the opposite room, laughed foolishly until the phone line almost broke. "Eric, that's the most touching words of love I've ever heard. I love you." Okay, I know you don't love me. You don't have to say it to hurt me." Drew's voice quickly sounded again. "Has the female role been chosen?" "It's not confirmed yet. There's still a day and a half to go through all the auditions. If it's still not confirmed, there will be a third round of auditions." "Oh, then if there's a third round, give Gwyneth another chance." Eric frowned. "Didn't I just say?" Drew interrupted Eric with a smirk. "I just want Gwyneth to owe me another favor. Although with her narcissistic and self-righteous personality, she definitely won't be able to repay this favor, I can still enjoy the feeling of being a creditor." Eric laughed. "Okay, if there's a third round of auditions, I'll let her know. Miss Lopez, thank you for your audition. We'll let you know as soon as there's a result." After the other party left, Eric drew a cross behind the girl's name again. Nickel came over and saw the red cross that Eric had drawn. He said regretfully, "Eric, I think this one is not bad, especially. Eric rolled his eyes at Nickel. "Your eyes lit up when you met this kind of woman?" Laughter rang out in the audition room. Nickel stared awkwardly at his colleagues who were laughing and retorted, "I'm a photographer. It's my job to appreciate beauty and record it." Assistant Director Royce, who had been mocked by Nickel yesterday, finally seized the opportunity to tease him. "What appreciation? You don't know. That night at Brady's bar, Nickel." "Royce, shut up. I'll kill you." Nickel hurriedly covered Royce's mouth. The two of them were entangled together until Royce was almost out of breath from Nickel's choking. Then he was separated by the others. Eric patted the table with a smile. "Okay, let the next audition come in. The sooner we finish the audition, the sooner we can prepare for the next job." After Eric finished speaking, he flipped to the next actress's profile. Before he could see the other party's name, a girl walked in with the staff. Eric clearly felt all the men around him gasp and look up. Stunning. That was Eric's first thought. She's mine. That was Eric's second thought. Chapter 111. The girl's face was exquisite and flawless, as if she had been personally sculpted by an artist. She had a head of black hair and was wearing a professional office suit. She held a white handbag in her hand and sat on the chair opposite her. She exuded a quiet and beautiful aura from head to toe. Deborah in Once Upon a Time in the United States was only a 13-year-old girl. Many years later, the girl who had finally gotten rid of her awkward career with Requiem for a Dream and Beautiful Mind was no longer as stunning as before. She only had a bit of maturity and intelligence left. Therefore, for her, the most stunning moment of her life was when she was around 20 years old. Eric didn't need to look at the information at hand and blurted out, "Miss Connolly, please introduce yourself first." "Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lynn Connolly. I'm 19 years old this year and I'm currently studying English literature at Yale University." The girl's voice was slightly hoarse. In the following question and answer session, Jennifer Connolly was still calm and composed. It wasn't until the acting session that a problem occurred. Although Jennifer Connolly had acted in many movies, she hadn't received professional acting training. Therefore, her acting skills were still very inexperienced, and she even had some facial paralysis. But it didn't matter. No one was born running. The key was that Eric was sure that Jennifer Connolly could definitely make the audience's eyes light up. Moreover, when she showed the weak expression when she was kidnapped by the robber Andy, she would completely arouse everyone's sympathy. It was very lethal. After all the segments were over, Eric put a tick behind Jennifer Connolly's name and looked up. "Miss Connolly, can I treat you to dinner tonight?" All the staff in the audition room were stunned. That was too direct. If you want to take advantage of the unspoken rules, at least avoid us and give us some good thoughts, right? Jennifer Connolly, who was about to leave, was also stunned. The girl's expression changed a few times. She had specially rushed back from Italy for this audition. In order to finish all the scenes, she had a little disagreement with the director of Death of the Swan. But if she could get this role, she wouldn't care about Death of a Swan at all. Going to Europe to shoot an indie film was a path that many actresses had no choice but to take when they encountered a bottleneck in their development in Hollywood. In this era, European films had not completely declined. Therefore, many actors and actresses were looking forward to acting in European films. Once they won an award, they would return home with glory. Then, they would have one more thing to rely on when they started to develop their careers. If the other party had invited her in private, Jennifer Connolly might not have hesitated too much. But in front of so many people, under the watchful eyes of so many people, it was difficult for the proud girl to put down her reservations for a while. Therefore, he was in a dilemma. "I'm sorry for my rudeness. Miss Connolly, thank you for your audition. We'll inform you of the results as soon as possible. You can leave now." Eric did indeed regret his invitation just now. He had intended to help the girl out of her predicament, but Jennifer Connolly thought that the other party had taken her hesitation as a rejection. If that was the case, then she definitely wouldn't get the role. She stood there hesitantly and didn't push the door open to leave. After hesitating for a few seconds, Jennifer Connelly said in a low voice, "Mr. Williams, I'm willing." "What?" Eric, who had lowered his head to write something, raised his head again. The girl's voice was very soft just now, and he really didn't hear it clearly. Jennifer Connelly's face turned red at Eric's rhetorical question. In front of so many people, she really didn't want to say it again. Nickel couldn't help but remind him, "Hey Eric, don't go too far. The girl has agreed." Eric reacted and quickly nodded. "That's great, Miss Connelly." Eric quickly wrote a series of numbers on a piece of paper and handed it to the girl. He said, 7 o'clock in the evening. I hope Miss Connelly can contact me at that time. I'll pick you up. After all, the audition has to continue. Many girls are still waiting." Jennifer Connelly lowered her head and quickly folded the piece of paper, put it in her handbag, and left the audition room in a hurry. "Hey, Eric, is it settled?" Nickel couldn't help but ask. Eric nodded. "If nothing unexpected happens, it's her. Then, do we still need to continue with the audition?" "Of course." Eric opened the next set of information. "So many people are still waiting, and maybe we can find someone even better. So, let's continue. Call the next one." Everyone in the audition room knew that Eric already had a candidate in mind, and the rest of the audition was even more listless. It wasn't until 5 o'clock in the afternoon that the last girl left the audition, and everyone couldn't wait to disperse. Eric went back to his office, packed up, and was about to leave when Jeffrey knocked on the door and walked in. Jeffrey handed a document to Eric and said, "Eric, this is the latest negotiation result. CAA has made some concessions. Cruz and Hank's conditions are the same. This time, it's 5 million yuan and 12% of the profits." Eric flipped through the document and thought for a while. "Forget it, Jeffrey. Let's not talk about it for the next few days. Let's wait until after this week. Dragon's Killing Formation is released on Friday. There will probably be a lot of excitement next week. That's what I wanted to tell you." Jeffrey smiled. Dragon's Killing Formation didn't perform very well in the previous test screenings. It's been premiering in North America for the past few days, and the results are evenly split between praise and criticism. United Artists recently used the gimmick of Richard Gere quitting Wind and Moon to hype it up, but the results weren't very good. "I think many people are waiting to see us make a fool of ourselves." Eric pursed his lips. "Who cares? As long as it's beneficial to us, it's fine. I think after Dragon's Killing Formation fails at the box office, CAA won't have the confidence to continue wasting time with us. Otherwise, Cruz and Hanks wouldn't have agreed. Should we try to contact the actors from WMA and the other agencies to fake a change in the lead?" Eric shook his head. "No, at least not for the time being. It's not that bad yet. Let's see how it goes." The two didn't talk much more, and left after a few more words. No one expected Dragon's Killing Formation to be like a fuse. The commotion it caused was far beyond Eric's expectations. Chapter 112. The purple Lamborghini Ghost stopped at the entrance of the hotel. Eric got out of the car and saw Jennifer Connelly standing outside the hotel. At this time, there was another middle-aged man in his 30s standing beside her. Eric walked up. The two people in front of him quickly noticed him and came up to him together. Jennifer Connelly had changed into a light blue dress and forced a smile at Eric. The middle-aged man beside the woman took the initiative to step forward enthusiastically. He extended his hand and introduced himself. "Mr. Williams, nice to meet you. I'm Miss Connelly's manager, Jim Lester." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Lester." Eric politely shook the man's hand and then turned to Jennifer Connelly. "Miss Connelly, let's go. I've already booked a restaurant." The woman looked at her manager for help. Eric's gaze and tone were too invasive. It was as if he had already treated her as his personal property. She had started her career at the age of 13. Because of her perfect and stunning appearance, She had encountered all kinds of covetous eyes on her more than once. However, none of them were like Eric, who was full of unreasonable possessiveness. She felt that if she were to let him be alone with her, then all the social skills she had learned to deal with men would be useless. Eric followed the woman's gaze and looked at Jim Lester, who was standing at the side. "Mr. Lester, do you want to come with us?" Lester did not dare to look directly at Jennifer Connelly's pleading eyes. He smiled and shook his head at Eric. "Of course not, Mr. Williams. How could I interrupt your date?" At this point, the middle-aged man waved his hand and made a meaningless gesture. He asked hesitantly, "Mr. Williams, can you tell me the result of Jenny's audition today?" Hearing Lester's nickname for Jennifer Connelly, Eric felt weird, but he still said directly, "If nothing goes wrong, the role will go to Miss Connelly." Even Jennifer Connelly, who was wary of Eric, could not help but raise her head and look at Eric in surprise, not to mention the ecstatic Lester. The girl's manager was also a smooth and slick person. As a man, he could see the determination in Eric's eyes. Therefore, he understood that Eric would definitely support her in the future. Given Eric Williams's style, he would try to poach the actors he fancied to his own agency. As the agent of a C-list actor, Lester knew that if he didn't take the initiative to seize this opportunity, he didn't know when he would encounter such a good opportunity again. "It's like this, Mr. Williams. I think UTA is an agency with a lot of potential, so I want to jump ship with my artists. What do you think?" Jennifer Connelly looked at her agent in surprise. Lester didn't mention this to her at all, which made her a little dissatisfied with Lester's decision. But in front of Eric, she didn't immediately flare up. At the same time, she looked at the young man in front of her with some worry. Of course, she knew that UTA was Eric's personal property. Once Eric agreed, for the sake of the role in Dark War, she wouldn't have any room to refuse. But deep down, she was against joining UTA. It wasn't that she didn't think highly of UTA, but if she did, it would make her feel like a lamb in a tiger's den. Eric also noticed Jennifer Connelly's surprised and worried expression. He looked at the short and fat middle-aged man in front of him with interest. "Mr. Lester, you are a smart person. You know how to seize the opportunity and make the right choice," Eric said after a moment. He did plan to poach Jennifer Connelly to UTA, and still let Kapoor guide her personally. But since the girl's agent took the initiative to bring up the matter of job hopping, Eric was happy to save himself the trouble. Since Lester wanted to continue guiding the girl, then let him try. After all, Eric couldn't put all the people he thought highly of under Kapoor's name. No matter how energetic Kapoor was, he wouldn't be able to handle it all. If Lester couldn't prove his ability in the future, he would still be fired. "Right, how many artists do you have under you now?" Eric remembered Lester's words and asked. "4, including Jenny," Lester immediately answered. Lester said immediately. Lester seemed to want to introduce the other 3, but Eric waved his hand and interrupted him. "Give up on the other 3. You brought Miss Connelly to UTA alone. I only have eyes for Miss Connelly, I don't need the other 3 burdens." The struggle in Lester's eyes disappeared in a flash. He had a good relationship with the actors under him. Among the other 3 actors, one of them was his friend's brother who specially asked him to do it. But when he thought about his future, Lester still made a decision within 5 seconds. "No problem, Mr. Williams." After this matter was settled, Lester tactfully took the initiative to leave and left Jennifer Connelly with Eric. After starting the car, Eric saw the dazed girl in the front passenger seat and suddenly leaned over. Jennifer Connelly noticed Eric's action and immediately raised her hands in front of her to protect herself. She asked in horror, What are you doing? Look at how scared you are." Eric pursed his lips and reached over the girl to pull the seatbelt on the front passenger seat. "I don't know how to drive this car, so it's safer to put on the seatbelt." "I can put it on myself," Jennifer Connelly said and reached out to grab the seatbelt. In her panic, she grabbed Eric's big hand and immediately pulled back as if she had been electrocuted. After putting on the seatbelt, Eric sat up straight but didn't start the car immediately. Instead, he turned his head to look at the girl who was fidgeting in the front passenger seat. "Are you afraid of me?" After a while, Eric finally asked. Jennifer Connelly nodded subconsciously, but realized that it was inappropriate and quickly shook her head. Mr. Williams, I didn't mean it that way. You can call me Eric. The girl looked out of the car window in a panic and softly said, Come, look at me. Eric's tone was slightly gentler. The girl couldn't help but turn her head with a questioning look in her eyes. Eric reached behind the girl and held the back of Connolly's head. His body suddenly leaned forward again and kissed the girl's delicate red lips. Jennifer Connelly was instantly stunned by Eric's actions. Her eyes widened and her pupils contracted rapidly. How can you do this? The girl's first reaction was to slap Eric and get out of the car to leave. However, she found that she was firmly tied to the seat by the seatbelt and couldn't move. She hurriedly unfastened the seatbelt. Eric had already stepped on the accelerator and drove the Lamborghini onto the road. However, the girl still said, Mr. Williams, please pull over, I want to get out of the car. Don't make a fuss. Obediently fasten your seatbelt. I want to get out of the car. The girl stubbornly retorted. Eric was about to say something when a convertible Mercedes-Benz sports car suddenly drove in front of them. The punk youth in the car obviously crossed the median line and overtook the car in the opposite direction. Eric cursed and slammed the steering wheel to barely avoid the convertible body. However, the two cars still brushed past each other closely. The punk youth in the car may have seen the beautiful girl in the front passenger seat. When they passed by, they screamed and whistled at the Lamborghini. When the Mercedes-Benz disappeared from the rearview mirror, Eric realized that he was already in a cold sweat. He cursed again and glanced at the girl who was also in a state of shock. Eric's tone became a little serious. Fasten your seatbelt. Jennifer Connelly didn't dare to resist this time. She also didn't want to play with her life. She obediently pulled out her seatbelt and fastened it. However, she stubbornly turned her head away from the person in the driver's seat. When they arrived at the entrance of a famous Italian restaurant in Beverly Hills, the doorman saw the gorgeous purple Ghost sports car and eagerly came over. Eric got out of the car, stuffed the keys and a tip to the doorman, and turned to the girl. Jennifer Connelly had already calmed down. After getting out of the car, she didn't leave in a huff. She reluctantly took Eric's arm and followed him to the restaurant. Is salad enough? Why don't you order something else? At the table, Eric heard the girl order and asked. Jennifer Connelly glanced at the waiter standing next to her and said in a low voice, I'm on a diet. Eric didn't try to persuade her again. He ordered his own dinner and a bottle of red wine before returning the menu to the waiter. After the waiter left, Eric said, Okay, girl, can you smile? You're making me feel very guilty. Do you still feel guilty? The girl glared at Eric and said, Don't talk to me in that old-fashioned tone, okay? You're only a few months older than me. It's really an honor. I didn't expect you to have already found out about my birthday. This will be very good for our future relationship. I also remember your birthday, December 12th. It's a very strange day, right? Eric's words made the girl a little uneasy. Where did you find out about my birthday? Files. Eric smiled and talked nonsense. He didn't have any psychological pressure when coaxing the girl. I also know more about you. As early as 1984, when Once Upon a Time in America was released, I already knew the beautiful girl who was like an angel. Since then, I couldn't forget her. I didn't expect that one day she would appear in front of me alive. There was no woman who didn't like this kind of compliment, let alone a young director who had recently risen to fame. Jennifer Connelly lowered her head, not daring to look at Eric's affectionate eyes, but a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. Even when Eric had offended her before, the girl couldn't help but excuse him. He must have done that because he liked me. Chapter 113. Eric continued. After that, it was Sarah in Magic Maze. In order to see more of that angel girl, I bought a videotape, but unfortunately, I lost it. Oh, and your recent movie, Sisters, I also liked it. Seeing Eric smile when he mentioned the last movie, Jennifer Connelly was a little embarrassed. That was her first time trying to act on a larger scale, so she was criticized by a lot of conservative people. The reason was that after the box office failure of Magic Maze, no one asked her to act in a movie for a long time. Jennifer even tried to find some opportunities in Japan, where she shot a few commercials and released 2 albums, but it still didn't help her career in any way. After returning to the United States, in order to continue to stay in Hollywood, she was persuaded by her agent to shoot the youth comedy. After being fooled by Eric's sweet words, the girl gradually let down her guard and opened her mouth. The two people chatted back and forth, and their behavior became more and more intimate. After dinner, she intimately held Eric's arm all the way to the parking lot. Sitting in the Lamborghini again, the girl became nervous again. What's next? Is he going to take me home? What should I do? Should I reject him? Maybe, but... The girl scratched her handbag a few times and secretly glanced at Eric, who started the car. She just happened to meet his eyes and quickly looked away. Eric smiled and said, "How about we go watch a movie first?" As if a death row prisoner suddenly received a notice to delay the execution, Jennifer nodded exaggeratedly and seemed to realize that her reaction was a bit excessive. She smiled awkwardly. "You should smile more, I like to see you smile." Eric said, started the car, and walked a few laps on the streets of downtown Beverly. He found a luxurious cinema and stopped the Lamborghini. He looked at the schedule and found that Dragon Killing Formation, which was released on Friday, was on public sale. It was probably a pre-screening arranged by the film company. He asked the ticket seller and just happened to have tickets, so he bought 2. "What is it?" When she saw Eric walking over, Jennifer looked at the movie tickets in his hand and said, "Dragon Killing Formation. I know, it's the movie starring Richard Gere. The newspaper also." After saying this, the woman suddenly shut her mouth. Eric smiled and held the girl's hand. He asked while walking, "What else did they say?" They said that Dragon Killing Formation will definitely surpass your Pretty Woman." "Oh, what tabloid did you read?" Eric sneered and said, "It seems that in order to promote this movie, United Artists has no bottom line." "But I think the analysis in that newspaper makes a lot of sense," the girl retorted weakly. "Oh, tell me how they analyzed it later, I'm quite interested too." The two talked to each other and bought Coke and popcorn together. They walked to the ticket gate, completely unaware that not far behind them, a thin and short white man was frantically taking pictures of them with a camera. When he saw the two of them walking to the screening hall of Dragon Killing Formation, he became even more excited. His fingers seemed to become unusually nimble as he pressed the shutter. After Eric and Jennifer disappeared from the ticket gate, the thin and short man, Victor, reluctantly put down his camera. He was originally a reporter for a fashion magazine in Los Angeles. He was responsible for the fashion section and had a lot of opportunities to interact with celebrities. Therefore, when Victor encountered a more valuable scandal, he didn't mind turning into a paparazzi for a second to earn some extra money. Meeting Eric and Jennifer Connelly today was a complete coincidence. Due to work, Victor worked overtime at the magazine until 8 o'clock in the evening. When he was driving home, he happened to bump into Eric's flashy purple Lamborghini Ghost. As a fashion magazine editor who had seen the movie Pretty Woman, Victor recognized the model of the car at a glance. He knew that the car wouldn't be on the market for a few months, so he thought that if he could take a few pictures and write an article like "Unlisted Lamborghini Ghost on the Streets of Los Angeles," it would be another quick buck. Due to the popularity of the movie Pretty Woman, recently, Lamborghini had become the most popular sports car in the world. Even famous cars like Ferrari had temporarily fallen behind. After carefully chasing the purple Ghost, it finally stopped in front of a cinema. Victor was waiting for the owner to leave before taking a picture, but he found that the first person to get out of the car was the famous Eric Williams. This didn't excite Victor too much. Everyone knew that Eric and Lamborghini had a wonderful advertising collaboration in the movie Pretty Woman. Under such circumstances, it wasn't strange that the other party could get a ghost sports car before it went on the market. If it was only Eric who got out of the car alone, Victor even made up his mind to not mention Eric's name at all in the article. Instead, he would make up a mysterious owner for the Ghost. This kind of trick would attract more attention. And once the Lamborghini Ghost was connected to Eric, the readers would think, "Oh, this is natural, and definitely not be interested in reading any further." Then, a girl got out of the front passenger seat of the sports car, which shocked Victor. It wasn't the most likely Drew Barrymore, nor was it Hollywood Cinderella Julia Roberts, nor was it Eric's real girlfriend Jennifer Aniston. It was another gorgeous girl, Jennifer Connelly. Although Jennifer Connelly wasn't very famous in Hollywood, Victor just happened to know her. Eric Williams's private life had always been the subject of interest of the paparazzi. Unfortunately, after he became famous, he didn't go to nightclubs or bars, and there were no rumors of any interesting hobbies. Although he had a storm with the legendary girlfriend of Jennifer Aniston, it quickly subsided, and there was news of the two getting back together. After that, the only time he appeared on camera with the opposite sex in a private setting was still Jennifer Aniston. Under such circumstances, although the paparazzi were more curious about his private life, they were also in a state where they didn't know where to bite. Gradually, they stopped chasing Eric. There were so many newsworthy stars in Hollywood, and no one would hang themselves on a tree. Therefore, today's gossip was completely taken advantage of by the paparazzi, Victor. At this time, the skinny man had already changed the film on his camera and was patiently waiting outside the cinema. At the same time, he was conflicted. Should the focus of this scandal be on Eric and his new girlfriend, Jennifer Connelly? Or should it be on Eric's viewing of The Killing Formation of the Dragon? Or should it be split into two different pieces of gossip? Chapter 114. Anti-Theft Post. Please subscribe tomorrow. Los Angeles International Airport. Olivia stayed at Sharp Point Manor for 10 days before she planned to return to London. Eric wanted to send her back on his private jet, but their relationship had never been made public. Olivia was worried that someone would notice if she took Eric's private jet, so she chose a commercial flight. It was close to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Eric stood in the VIP lounge of Los Angeles International Airport and watched Olivia's flight glide off the runway into the clouds before he turned to leave. It was already May 21st, another Friday. Although it had hurt a lot last night, it hadn't hurt his bones at all. He'd recovered after 3 or 4 days of rest, but he'd still recuperated at home for more than a week. During this week, with the announcement that Firefly would stop working with Blockbuster, Hollywood was extremely lively. Media from all over North America and even the world were paying close attention to the dispute between Firefly and Viacom. Lei Shedong lived up to his tough personality. He did not show any signs of backing down for an entire week. After publicly criticizing the Firefly system on Monday, he handed over all the public appearances to the other higher-ups of Viacom. However, despite Lei Shedong's tough attitude, Viacom's stock price did not show the same level of toughness as Lei Shedong. When Eric was having lunch with Olivia at noon, he received Viacom's stock price information from the East Coast as of the end of the week. Although after the big drop on Monday, Viacom's stock price began to slow down in the following few working days. However, the company's stock price still fell by 23% in a week, and $16.8 billion of market value was wiped off. At this time, compared to the $73.1 billion market value at the beginning of the week, Viacom's market value had plummeted to $56.3 billion. In just 1 week, the stock book loss reached $16.8 billion. Even if Lei Shedong could bear it, the other shareholders of Viacom could not. Due to the dual ownership structure, the Lei Shedong family still owned 56% of Viacom's voting rights. Under normal circumstances, almost no one could threaten the Lei Shedong family's dominance over Viacom Group. However, the dual ownership structure was not omnipotent. Once the major shareholder with absolute control was unable to solve the company's problems for a long time and seriously damaged the interests of the majority of shareholders, the external shareholders could still call for an interim shareholders meeting and vote to abolish the dual ownership structure of the company and reorganize the company's board of directors and management. According to the Securities Exchange Act of the United States, to abolish the dual ownership structure, the support of 2/3 of a company's shareholders was required. After the merger with CBS Group, the Lei Shedong family only held 13.5% of Viacom's shares through the National Entertainment Company. The remaining 86.5% of the shares were held by institutions and public shareholders. If Lei Sherdong was stubborn and completely lost the support of all external shareholders, it would not be too difficult to win about 66.7% of the votes from the 86.5% of shares. Now, the company's market value had plummeted $16.8 billion in a week. This had obviously reached the limit of what Viacom's external shareholders could bear. Lax. Olivier stayed at Shophorn Manor for 10 days, then planned to return to London. Eric wanted to use his private jet to send her back, but the relationship between the two parties had never been made public. Olivier was worried that people would notice if she took Eric's private jet, so she chose a commercial flight. It was close to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Standing in the VIP terminal of LAX, Eric watched Olivier's flight glide out of the runway and into the clouds before he turned around and left. It was already May 21st, another Friday. Although it had hurt a lot last night, it hadn't hurt his bones at all. He'd recovered after 3 or 4 days of rest, but he'd still recuperated at home for more than a week. During this week, with the announcement that Firefly would stop cooperating with Blockbuster, Hollywood was extremely lively. The media in North America and even the world were closely watching the dispute between Firefly and Viacom. Lei Sherdong was indeed a tough character. He did not show any signs of backing down for an entire week. After publicly criticizing the Firefly system on Monday, he handed over all the public appearances to the other higher-ups of Viacom. However, despite Lei Sherdong's tough attitude, Viacom's stock price did not show the same level of toughness as Lei Sherdong. When Eric was having lunch with Olivier at noon, he received Viacom's stock price information on the East Coast at the end of the week. Although after the big drop on Monday, Viacom's stock price began to slow down in the following few working days. However, the company's stock price still fell by 23% in a week, and $16.8 billion was wiped off its market value. At this time, compared to the $73.1 billion market value at the beginning of the week, Viacom's market value had plummeted to $56.3 billion. In just 1 week, the stock paper loss reached $16.8 billion. Even if Lei Sherdong himself could bear it, the other shareholders of Viacom could not. Due to the dual ownership structure, the Lei Sherdong family still owned 56% of Viacom's voting rights. Under normal circumstances, almost no one could threaten the Lei Sherdong family's ruling position over Viacom. However, the dual ownership structure was not omnipotent. Once the major shareholder with absolute control could not solve the company's problem for a long time and seriously damaged the interests of the majority of shareholders, the external shareholders could still call for an interim shareholders meeting and vote to abolish the company's dual ownership structure and reorganize the company's board of directors and management. According to the U.S. Securities Exchange Act, to abolish the dual ownership structure, 2/3 of a company's shareholders had to support it. After the merger with CBS Corporation, the Lei Sherdong family only owned 13.5% of Viacom's shares through the National Entertainment Company. The remaining 86.5% of the shares were owned by institutions and public shareholders. If Lei Sherdong insisted on doing things his way and completely lost the support of all the external shareholders, it would not be too difficult to get about 66.7% of the votes from the 86.5% of shares. Now, the company's market value had plummeted $16.8 billion in a week. This had obviously reached the limit of what Viacom's external shareholders could bear. Los Angeles International Airport. Olivier stayed at the Shop Corner Manor for 10 days before she planned to return to London. Eric wanted to send her back on his private jet, but the relationship between the two parties had not been made public. Olivier was worried that people would notice if she took Eric's private jet, so she chose a commercial flight. It was close to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Standing in the VIP terminal of the Los Angeles International Airport, Eric watched Olivier's flight glide out of the runway and into the clouds before he turned to leave. It was already May 21st, another Friday. Although it had hurt a lot last night, it hadn't hurt his bones at all. He'd recovered after 3 or 4 days of rest, but he'd still recuperated at home for more than a week. During this week, With the announcement that Firefly System would stop cooperating with Blockbuster, Hollywood was extremely lively. The media in North America and even the world were closely watching the dispute between Firefly System and Viacom. Lei Shedong was indeed a tough character. He did not show any signs of backing down for an entire week. After publicly criticizing the Firefly System on Monday, he handed over all the public appearances to the other higher-ups of Viacom. However, despite Lei Shedong's tough attitude, Viacom's stock price did not show the same level of toughness as Lei Shedong. When Eric was having lunch with Olivier at noon, he received Viacom's stock price information on the East Coast as of the end of the week. Although the decline of Viacom's stock price began to slow down after the big drop on Monday, the company's stock price still fell by 23% in a week. 16.8 billion was wiped off its market value. At this time, compared to the $73.1 billion market value at the beginning of the week, Viacom's market value had plummeted to $56.3 billion. In just 1 week, the stock book loss reached $16.8 billion. Even if Lei Shedong could bear it, the other shareholders of Viacom could not. Due to the dual ownership structure, the Lei Shedong family still owned 56% of Viacom's voting rights. Under normal circumstances, almost no one could threaten the Lei Shedong family's dominance over Viacom. However, the dual ownership structure was not omnipotent. Once the major shareholder with absolute control could not solve the company's problems for a long time and seriously damaged the interests of the majority of shareholders, the external shareholders could still call for an interim shareholders meeting and vote to abolish the dual ownership structure of the company and reorganize the company's board of directors and management. According to the U.S. Securities Exchange Act, to abolish the dual ownership structure, 2/3 of a company's shareholders had to support it. After the merger with CBS Corporation, the Lei Shedong family only owned 13.5% of Viacom's shares through the National Entertainment Company. The remaining 86.5% of the shares were owned by institutions and public shareholders. If Lei Shedong insisted on doing things his way and completely lost the support of all the external shareholders, it would not be too difficult to get about 66.7% of the votes from the 86.5% of shares. Now, the company's market value had plummeted $16.8 billion in a week. This had obviously reached the limit of what Viacom's external shareholders could bear. Los Angeles International Airport. Olivier stayed at the Shop Corner Manor for 10 days before she planned to return to London. Eric wanted to send her back on his private jet, but the relationship between the two parties had not been made public. Olivier was worried that people would notice if she took Eric's private jet, so she chose a commercial flight. It was close to 4:00 in the afternoon. Standing in the VIP terminal of Los Angeles International Airport, Eric watched Olivier's flight glide out of the runway and into the clouds before he turned to leave. It was already May 21st, another Friday. Although it had hurt a lot last night, it hadn't hurt his bones at all. He'd recovered after 3 or 4 days of rest, but he'd still recuperated at home for more than a week. During this week, with the announcement that Firefly would stop cooperating with the Blockbuster chain, Hollywood was extremely lively. Media from all over North America and the world were closely watching the dispute between Firefly and Viacom. Lei Shedong lived up to his tough personality. He did not show any signs of backing down for an entire week. After publicly criticizing the Firefly System on Monday, he handed over all the public appearances to the other higher-ups of Viacom. However, despite Lei Shedong's tough attitude, Viacom's stock price did not show the same level of toughness as Lei Shedong. When Eric was having lunch with Olivier at noon, he received Viacom's stock price information on the East Coast as of the end of the week. Although the decline of Viacom's stock price began to slow down after the big drop on Monday, the company's stock price still fell by 23% in a week. $16.8 billion was wiped off its market value. At this time, compared to the market value of $73.1 billion at the beginning of the week, Viacom's market value had plummeted to $56.3 billion. In just 1 week, the stock paper loss reached $16.8 billion. Even if Lei Shedong could bear it, the other shareholders of Viacom could not. Due to the dual ownership structure, the Lei Sherdong family still owned 56% of Viacom's voting rights. Under normal circumstances, almost no one could threaten the Lei Sherdong family's ruling position over Viacom. However, the dual ownership structure was not omnipotent. Once the major shareholder with absolute control could not solve the company's problems for a long time and seriously damaged the interests of the majority of shareholders, the external shareholders could still call for an interim shareholders meeting and vote to abolish the company's dual ownership structure and reorganize the company's board of directors and management. According to the U.S. Securities Exchange Act, to abolish the dual ownership structure, 2/3 of a company's shareholders had to support it. After the merger with CBS Corporation, the Lei Sherdong family only owned 13.5% of Viacom's stock through the National Entertainment Company. The remaining 86.5% of the stock was owned by institutions and public shareholders. If Lei Sherdong insisted on doing things his way and completely lost the support of all external shareholders, it would not be too difficult to get about 66.7% of the votes from the 86.5% of the stock. Now, the company's market value had plummeted $16.8 billion in a week. This had obviously reached the limit of what Viacom's external shareholders could bear. After the merger with CBS Corporation, the Lei Sherdong family only owned 13.5% of Viacom's stock through the National Entertainment Company. The remaining 86.5% of the stock was owned by institutions and public shareholders. If Lei Sherdong insisted on doing things his way and completely lost the support of all external shareholders, it would not be too difficult to get about 66.7% of the votes from the 86.5% of the stock. Now, the company's market value had plummeted $16.8 billion in a week. This had obviously reached the limit of what Viacom's external shareholders could bear. Chapter 115. They were in a secluded alley, and the street was about 10 meters to the left. Eric had just walked out of the alley with the girl when a small figure dashed toward them. After Victor was escorted out of the lobby by the security guard, he realized that Eric hadn't come out, so he decisively ran to the back door. Eric and Jennifer were both newbies when it came to dealing with paparazzi. They had only thought of a backdoor strategy, but had completely underestimated the paparazzi's shrewdness. Victor didn't mind Eric's action of coming out of the back door. This time, he didn't take any photos, because the camera had plenty of intimate photos of the two of them, and that was enough. Holding a tape recorder in front of Eric, Victor asked, "Eric, is Miss Jennifer Connelly your new girlfriend?" Eric didn't answer, but pulled Jennifer Connelly and quickly walked to the parking lot. But the girl was wearing high heels, so she couldn't walk very far. Victor followed Eric closely, and persistently asked, "Eric, why did you come to watch Dragon? Are you worried that it will threaten the box office of Wind and Moon?" "Eric, when will Dark War start shooting? Did Cruise and Hanks encounter CAA's strong obstruction, just like Richard Gere?" Although Eric was a newbie when it came to dealing with paparazzi, he firmly remembered one of the most useful rules. When faced with paparazzi who suddenly appeared, no matter what they asked or how they provoked, it was best to not say a word. Because no matter what you said, the paparazzi would twist and interpret it according to their own wishes. Seeing that he couldn't get anything out of Eric, Victor decisively changed his target. "Jennifer, when did you start dating Eric? Don't you mind that Eric has another girlfriend named Jennifer? Jennifer, will you be the female lead in Dark War? Jennifer, will you move to Eric's Beverly Hills mansion?" In the face of Victor's questioning, Jennifer's face slowly showed an impatient look. Just as she was about to say something, Eric had already pulled the girl to the side of the Lamborghini, opened the door, and quickly stuffed the girl in. "Hey, Eric, since you're treating Miss Jennifer so rudely, does that mean that you two aren't a couple? Then what's your relationship? Is it some kind of deal?" Eric. The scissor door of the Lamborghini was pulled shut. Victor could only slap the windshield of the sports car and ask loudly. Unfortunately, he was destined to get no answer. The sports car started slowly and soon disappeared into the traffic. Along the way, Jennifer Connelly kept her head down and remained silent. Eric was neither a gentleman nor a very patient person. He had planned to take the girl down tonight. Unfortunately, the paparazzi's questions hinted at some kind of deal between the female lead and the male director. Considering Jennifer's feelings, Eric could only give up for the time being. Eric had thought of spending a sum of money to buy Victor's negatives and shut him up. After all, he was the only paparazzi. However, the other party had the tape recorder on, so he didn't have a chance to speak. Moreover, there was a lot of risk in this kind of thing. If the price couldn't be negotiated and the bribe failed, then a small matter like watching a movie together would become a big deal. The Lamborghini stopped in front of the hotel where Jennifer was staying. The girl was still sitting there quietly. She didn't rush to open the door and get out of the car, as if she was hesitating about something. Eric didn't rush her. His fingers danced on the steering wheel like he was playing the piano. He thought the girl had just been frightened and needed to sit there to calm down. Mr. Williams. After a while, Jennifer Connelly finally raised her head, and for the first time, she summoned the courage to look Eric in the eyes. However, her tone was a little more distant. "You didn't break up with the girl named Jennifer Aniston, right?" Eric's fingers suddenly stopped dancing on the steering wheel. He hesitated for a moment and nodded. Yes. Although Jennifer Connelly didn't have high hopes, her face still showed a sad expression. "Then, Mr. Williams, I think I might not be suitable for the role in Dark War. You should consider someone else." "If it's because of what the paparazzi said just now, Jennifer, I won't pester you any more in the future," Eric promised casually. He made up his mind to calm the girl down first. As expected, Jennifer Connelly's face showed a conflicted expression. In the end, the girl's pride defeated her desire for fame and fortune. "I'm sorry, Eric. Even if there's nothing between us in the future, those newspapers will still talk about us. I don't want to be seen as that kind of woman." Eric stared at the girl for a long time before saying, "Okay, as you wish." Although he was domineering, he wasn't a bully. Since Jennifer Connelly was so determined, Eric didn't insist. Hearing Eric's words, Jennifer Connelly didn't look happy at all. She knew what her giving up meant. Her career might be at a low ebb for a long time. The girl was about to open the door and leave when Eric suddenly stopped her. "Jennifer, wait a minute." Jennifer had no choice but to sit back down and look at Eric in confusion. Eric searched his pockets for a long time but couldn't find anything like a business card. He could only take the girl's handbag and take out a lipstick from it. He forced the girl's small hand to quickly write a string of numbers on it. "This is my home phone number. If you need my help in the future, you can call me at any time." Jennifer looked at the Arabic numbers on her hand and finally nodded her head to thank him before opening the door and leaving. Jennifer Connelly didn't dare to look back until she walked into the hotel lobby. She found that the Lamborghini was still parked in the same place. The girl quickly turned her head back and looked away. When she returned to the hotel room, she felt a little tired. She put her handbag on the coffee table and walked into the bathroom. She turned on the tap and looked down at the string of numbers in her hand. She reached out her hand a few times but couldn't bear to wash it away. In the end, she sighed softly and went back to the living room to find the address book. She wrote down the number and went back to the bathroom to take a shower. 20 minutes later, the girl returned to the living room wearing a bathrobe and using a towel to dry her wet hair. Just then, she heard a knock on the door. "Jenny, I just heard a waiter say that you're back. Why are you back?" Agent Lester had a bad feeling in his heart and asked in a nervous tone. "Sorry, Jim, I just turned down that role." "You?" The premonition in his heart became reality. Lester's lips trembled a few times, but it turned into a dejected voice. "Jenny, you're too impulsive. Do you know how many girls submitted their information to Firefly for this role? More than 2,800 girls, but only about 200 got the opportunity to audition. I heard that Eric Williams also turned down a few A-list Hollywood actresses. Listen to these numbers, you should understand how lucky you are." Chapter 116. Hearing Lester's words, the woman was speechless for a moment. She also realized that she was being reckless and willful, but she did not regret it too much. Lester asked again, "Jenny, Eric Williams just treated you to a meal. Even if he makes some outrageous requests, if you don't want to, you can just politely refuse. He may be young, but he's a big shot in Hollywood now. He won't do anything that's too out of line. Why do you have to turn down the role?" "It's not because of that. It's because, when we came back, the paparazzi took pictures of us," the woman explained a little irritably. "I don't want to be known as the kind of woman who uses her body to get to where she is. At most, I'll just endure for a few more years." Lester followed Jennifer into the room and sat down on the sofa. He explained earnestly, "Jenny, Hollywood only remembers the winners. As long as you become a top actress, no one will bother you about what you did in the past. You don't even have to say anything. Many people will take the initiative to help you cover up your past. That's the real reality. Moreover, many women in Hollywood want to get a chance. They're even willing to accompany those old and ugly men. In comparison, Eric Williams is young and handsome. It shouldn't be hard to accept something happening with him, right?" Jennifer Connelly pouted. "But he has an official girlfriend." "Then you can snatch him." Lester waved his hand in the air. "Don't you have confidence in your appearance, Jenny? I know that Williams has an official girlfriend, but so what? They're not even engaged. Plus, they've been living apart for a long time. This kind of relationship is the most unstable. You have a great chance to snatch him away." "But I—" The woman scratched her head in distress. She did not want to admit in front of her manager that when she was with Eric, she did not even have the courage to look him in the eyes, let alone snatch him away from other women. He was such a domineering man. She had to be careful around him. How could she have any thoughts about him? The more Jennifer thought about it, the more entangled she became. She screamed and suddenly threw herself on the sofa. She pulled a pillow over her head and said in a muffled voice, "Jim, don't push me any more." All right. Lester could tell that the girl was determined not to look back. After being the girl's agent for so many years, Lester knew Jennifer's temperament very well. He said helplessly, "Then, call Peter tomorrow and apologize in person. Because we had to rush for this audition, a lot of the filming for Death of a Swan was completed in a hurry. If we still need to reshoot the scenes, we'll go to Rome again." "I understand. Don't answer so half-heartedly, Jenny," Lester said seriously. "Since you've given up this opportunity, you don't know when you'll get another role in Hollywood. So, you have to maintain a good relationship in Europe to ensure that you won't be in an awkward situation where you can't get a role." "Yes." The girl's voice was a little louder. Lester still wanted to say something, but when he saw that the girl was still acting like an ostrich, his interest waned. He got up and patted Jennifer on the shoulder. "Then, sleep early. I'm going back to my room." After closing the door of the girl's room, Lester still couldn't help but shake his head. What a good opportunity. If she could climb up to Eric Williams, the rising star, it would be like reaching the sky in one step, reaching the sky in one step. An 18-year-old girl was still a child after all. She held on to the inexplicable pride in her heart and still didn't fully understand what she had lost. Lester originally spent most of his energy on Connery. After the box office failure of Magical Labyrinth, Connery, who was still a 15-year-old girl, couldn't get a movie contract for a long time. Lester rushed to Japan to develop her career, and then went to Europe to look for opportunities to get a movie contract for her. In order to let this overly beautiful girl get rid of her status as a vase, he also arranged a path for her to become a talented woman. For this reason, he painstakingly arranged for the girl to study English literature at Yale University. Anyway, the public was always easy to fool. Not too many people would argue about the difference between a researcher and a formal student. As long as she had this layer of halo, it was fine. But now, he suddenly felt that perhaps he should spend more energy on cultivating the other actors under his command. Well, that young man named Sean is not bad. He has good acting skills, is handsome, and most importantly, is very smart. He has a maturity that is rare for boys of his age. As for Connery, let her be. Being rejected just like that, it was quite frustrating to think about. In the Lamborghini, Eric leaned over the steering wheel and watched Connery walk into the hotel before looking away. Although he had encountered a few twists and turns after his rebirth, overall, everything had been smooth sailing. Eric, who was a little arrogant, had almost forgotten the taste of failure. Irritated, he looked at the road signs beside the road and found that Jeffrey's house was quite close. Eric drove straight to the old man's house. Knocking on the door, Jeffrey was wearing pajamas and a ridiculous pointy nightcap. Seeing Eric's gloomy face, Jeffrey quickly turned sideways to let Eric in. Surprised, he asked, "Eric, why are you looking for me so late at night? Did something happen?" Eric shook his head. "It's nothing. I was rejected halfway through the date. I just found that your house is quite close to mine, so I came to talk to you." Jeffrey, who was about to pour water for Eric, stopped and turned his head in surprise. "Just because of this?" "Well," Jeffrey put the teacup back and turned to condemn him. "You bastard, get out of here. Can't you see that it's almost 11 o'clock? I work myself to death managing your company during the day, and you still come to harass me in the middle of the night." Eric scratched his head and protested. "Hey, don't be so angry. I'm very fragile right now. I need to be comforted. Get out of here." Jeffrey walked unceremoniously to the sofa, grabbed Eric's collar and pulled him up. Jeffrey, don't pull. My suit costs more than 2,000 yuan. Eric got rid of the old man and threw the Lamborghini key on the coffee table. "I'll leave this car with you. Let me drive your car." Jeffrey glanced at the logo on the car key. "The Lamborghini gave you the ghost. Why do you want mine for such a good car?" Eric said gloomily, "Don't mention it. The paparazzi took pictures of it the first time I drove it out. It'll definitely be on the newspapers in the next 2 days. There's only one purple ghost in the whole of Los Angeles now. Do I still dare to drive it?" "All right, follow me." Jeffrey brought Eric to his garage and handed a car key to Eric. "Drive my Buick." Eric saw a brand new Mercedes-Benz parked next to the Buick. He pointed and said, "This one, give me this one. I'll trade my Lamborghini for yours." "Don't even think about it." Jeffrey glared at Eric angrily. He walked forward and patted the hood of the Mercedes-Benz. His tone instantly became gentle. "This is Solina's." "All right." Eric listened to Jeffrey's explanation and immediately shut his mouth. He shrugged and obediently took the Buick key from Jeffrey's hand. The old man treated everything his wife left behind like a treasure. All the producer's share he got from Eric was not used to buy a mansion or invest. Instead, he used all of it to buy the rights to the movies his wife Solina had filmed. It was said that he had even been taken advantage of several times. In front of such an infatuated man, Eric would have to step over the old man's corpse if he wanted to drive the Mercedes-Benz away. He drove the Buick all the way to Malibu and stopped in front of Virginia's small villa. He knocked on the door of the girl's house and directly carried the petite woman into the bedroom. "Ha, you're really a little bastard. You were rejected by another girl and now you're tormenting me. Quick, tell me, what kind of girl rejected our successful Eric Williams? I'm really curious. Vicky, let's not talk about this, okay?" "Okay, but don't look for me tonight." After the repeated commotion, Eric gradually calmed down and realized that his mentality was too unbalanced. He reached out and rubbed his face hard. After thinking for a while, he felt that perhaps it was the residual consciousness of this young body that was causing trouble. If it was the 100% him, he would not have panicked and felt defeated because of being rejected by a young girl. Only those inexperienced guys who had always been smooth sailing would be like this. He inherited the body and part of the memories of the original owner. Although his soul had dominated everything, he would more or less be affected by the young man's personality and habits. The other party was not like him, who had experienced so many twists and turns in his previous life. Eric did not know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing for him. "Hey, Eric, are you okay?" The girl saw Eric rubbing his face and frowning. She leaned over and asked worriedly, I'm fine, Vicky, I'm fine. Eric reached out and hugged Virginia. He explained, actually, it's like this. Chapter 117. Jennifer Connelly, that's a very lucky girl. She was able to act in Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America at the age of 13, so it's natural for her to have some naivety and pride. When she reaches the age of 30 and still hasn't achieved anything in Hollywood, then there won't be any persistence left. After listening to Eric's story, the girl leaned in front of him and sighed. She must have thought of her own experience. Eric could only hug the girl to comfort her. At the same time, he remembered something. Jennifer Connelly's pride didn't persist until the age of 30. At the age of 20, in order to have a breakthrough in her career, she couldn't wait to choose the path of fame. This was quite a big risk for an actress who had always walked the path of a pure and innocent girl. Many actresses failed in this risk. However, that risk did bring some turnaround in her acting career. Soon, she got the female lead in Disney's The Rocket Expert. Unfortunately, that movie was a flop again. So far, since the girl's debut, the big movies she acted in including Once Upon a Time in America, Magic Labyrinth, and The Rocket Expert, all failed at the box office. Although these failures didn't have much to do with her, Hollywood producers were also very superstitious. So, for the next 5 years, Jennifer Connelly disappeared from the public's view. Virginia looked up at Eric and suggested, "Eric, actually, it's not too difficult for you to get her." Eric looked at the girl in his arms. Virginia said, "You have your own film company now. When you have a new film project in the future, you just have to throw her a film contract from time to time as bait. For a little girl who yearns for the Vanity Fair of Hollywood, bait her a few times and she will be obediently hooked." Wow, I didn't expect to be holding a beautiful snake who escaped from the Garden of Eden in my arms. Eric said, "It seems that I have to punish her." "Well, you're not depressed anymore, right?" Virginia snuggled into Eric's arms again. "Of course not. I'm a man who wants to become the king of Hollywood. This little setback is nothing. In the future, I want to reach even higher heights than the playboy Howard Hughes." Virginia retorted, "This is no longer the era of big studios. No one can completely control Hollywood. And he still calls himself the king of Hollywood. What a joke. It's very simple. Just turn Hollywood back to the era of big studios." You are really arrogant. When the day comes, don't forget to send a message to me from heaven." Eric smirked. "I'll send you to heaven right now." Although Eric played until late last night, he still woke up early. If a person wanted to make a difference, a good work and rest habit was necessary. He put on his clothes and went down to the second floor. He did some simple exercises in the courtyard and prepared breakfast for two. However, there was still no movement from the girl upstairs. Eric didn't wake her up. He walked out of the courtyard and took out today's newspaper from the mailbox, reading it as he ate. Virginia didn't order many newspapers, but Eric still found news about him because it appeared in the entertainment section of the famous Los Angeles Times. Although it wasn't the headline, it was still in a very prominent position. Williams watched Mighty Dragon with his female companion, worried that the box office of Wind and Moon would be affected. Last night, someone met the young director Eric Williams on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills. The other party drove a purple Lamborghini monster sports car and acted intimately with Jennifer Connelly, a Hollywood child star and beauty. Jennifer Connelly was lucky enough to act in the classic movie Once Upon a Time in America at the age of 13. Then, she acted in a series of works such as Magical Labyrinth. However, this girl with exquisite looks didn't have a smooth path to stardom. She didn't have any outstanding works in recent years. Under such circumstances, she appeared together with Eric Williams and acted intimately. Did this mean that another Hollywood Cinderella was about to be born? Coincidentally, Williams' new film Dark War was undergoing intense auditions for the female lead. According to reliable sources, Jennifer Connelly also participated in the audition. It was hard not to think that the female lead had already been decided. It seemed that the hundreds of girls who were full of expectations for the audition were going to be disappointed. After the two of them got out of the Lamborghini together, they didn't go shopping or other activities. Instead, they went straight to a cinema and watched the pre-screening of Richard Gere's new film, Mighty Dragon. When they walked out of the screening room, Eric Williams looked solemn. After noticing the reporters, he pulled Jennifer Connelly and hurriedly left through the back door. He didn't say a word the entire time. It seemed that Mighty Dragon's killing formation had put a lot of pressure on Eric. When Richard Gere saw the script of Mighty Dragon's killing formation, he praised it greatly and resolutely gave up on Williams' Pretty Woman. This movie is a hot action movie created by Hollywood's new action movie director, Claudio Harrington, and the famous movie star, Richard Gere, at a cost of $20 million. It incorporates fighting, racing, gunfights, explosions, and many other elements. After the pre-screening, it received unanimous praise from film critics and audiences. I believe it will bring you a passionate visual feast during this Easter period. It seemed that the senior management of United Artists had spent a lot of effort to promote this movie. It wasn't easy to publish this kind of promotional article in the LA Times. Even if the investment for this movie wasn't $20 million, it wasn't far off. The pressure to recoup the cost was considerable. Eric didn't mind that the latter half of the article was using him to hype up Mighty Dragon's killing formation. Anyway, the quality of Mighty Dragon's killing formation was there. After watching the movie yesterday, he heard that the audience's comments either deviated from certain details or criticized without mercy. This article was destined to be a slap in the face. However, Eric couldn't help but frown at the description of himself and Jennifer Connelly in the first half of the book. Although it wasn't explicitly stated, everyone could see that it was hinting that there was some kind of unfair transaction in the selection of the female lead in his new film. In Hollywood, it was common for actresses to climb up the ranks of producers, directors, or investors for roles. Everyone was well aware of this and tacitly agreed to this kind of transaction. However, this kind of thing could only be done in private. Once it was exposed by the media, the people involved would definitely be questioned and condemned by the public. Their social image would also be affected. The easiest way to reverse this situation was to publicly announce that the two of them were in a relationship. Many directors in Hollywood would date their female leads every time they made a movie. This way, people would accuse them of being playboys, but people wouldn't associate it with some kind of transaction. However, Eric didn't plan to do that. Moreover, the girl who had just rejected him last night wouldn't cooperate with him. After thinking about it, Eric decided to let it be. If he refuted this kind of thing in the media, it would only make things worse. Connelly had already rejected the female lead anyway. When the cast list was announced in the future, the rumors would be dispelled. He wasn't like celebrities who relied on their fame and public image to make a living. Many big directors in Hollywood didn't have a good public image, but they still won awards and earned box office. However, the LA Times plotted against him. He had to remember this and pay it back. Chapter 118. Eric also knew that United Artists must have been behind this report. Suppressing and discrediting their competitors for their own interests was a tactic that had been used many times in various industries. However, this simple and crude method always had good results. After breakfast, he put Virginia's breakfast in the fridge and said goodbye to the girl who was still resting on the couch. Eric drove to Firefly Corporation. There were still some actresses to audition today. As soon as he arrived at the company, he was pulled into the office by Jeffrey. There was no need to ask. He knew what was going on just by looking at the way the other employees were looking at him. The Los Angeles Times was the most famous newspaper in Los Angeles. In this era where there was no internet and information was mainly transmitted through print media and television, the subscription rate of residents in the greater Los Angeles area was quite high. Therefore, Eric was sure that everyone in the company knew about the news that appeared in the newspaper. Facing Jeffrey's worried gaze before the other party could speak, Eric quickly explained, "Jeffrey, I know that this is indeed my negligence. However, Jennifer Connelly has already rejected the role. Therefore, when the list of roles is announced in the future, this rumor will definitely collapse." Jeffrey sighed and said, "All right, Eric, I hope you know what you're doing. Do you need to contact Kapoor and do some PR?" Eric shook his head. "There's no need. If I explain this kind of thing, it will be seen as a cover-up. Ignoring it is the best way to deal with it." Jeffrey nodded and took out a document and handed it to Eric. "This is the final price I negotiated with the sponsors based on your opinion. Except for Motorola, the rest have been confirmed. The total is $4 million US. If you have no objections, I will sign these contracts today." Eric took it and flipped through it. Except for Motorola's $3 million US order, which had to be finalized by Cruz and Hanks, the rest had been confirmed. The highest, Lamborghini, offered $800,000 US, and the lowest, Marvel Comics, only offered $100,000 US. In the movie, when the robber Andy robbed the finance company, there was only a brief glimpse of the portfolio containing the comics. $100,000 US was not a small amount. Eric was not sure if this advertisement could be sold. Seeing the name of Marvel Comics, Eric could not help but touch his chin. This was a huge gold mine. He had to get it before the other party sold the character licenses to relieve financial pressure. As the two were talking, Alan Fissman knocked on the office door. "Mr. Hansen, Eric, it's time for the audition." "I'll be right there," Eric replied. Alan nodded and left. "Then I'll go preside over the audition." Jeffrey. Have a good rest this weekend. The filming of Dark War will start next week. It will definitely be very busy. I know. Jeffrey nodded and then revealed a resentful look. "As long as you don't come to harass me in the middle of the night." Eric curled his lips and muttered. He waved his hand and walked out of the office. Perhaps it was because they had seen the news about the internally confirmed actors in the Los Angeles Times, but after the audition began, many of the actresses in the audition were absent-minded. Eric was too lazy to remind them of anything. He could not hold on to the slightest bit of hope. If he missed the opportunity, he could only blame himself. Next, Miss Gabrielle Anwar. A petite woman about 18 years old walked in. Although she was wearing black high heels, the girl was still less than 1.7 meters tall. "Hello, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Anwar." Eric carefully looked at the girl who was the same age as him. She had a sharp nose, thick lips, and some Indian characteristics. She should be of mixed blood. Looking at the information in front of him, he did not follow the procedure for the girl to introduce herself. Instead he asked, "Miss Anwar, did you come from England?" The girl nodded and revealed a charming smile. "I was born in Middlesex, but I also grew up in London." Eric smiled. He knew that the girl was trying to get close to him. He also grew up in London until he was 8 years old before moving to Los Angeles. Moreover, Eric still had British citizenship. Williams was one of the 5 surnames in Britain. Whether he wanted to or not, he was destined to be included in the British circle in Hollywood. "Then, Miss Anwar, the information shows that you went to a drama and dance school. Do you know how to dance the tango?" The girl hesitated for a moment and shook her head. "No, but I studied ballet for 10 years. If necessary, I can learn the tango in the shortest time possible." Eric gave her an appreciative look. "Miss Anwar, I like your honesty. But I don't think you're suitable for this role, so there's no need for an audition." The girl heard the first half of Eric's praise, but before she could feel happy, she heard the second half of Eric's words. For a moment, she sat there in a daze. A faint layer of mist quickly appeared in her big eyes. She was so aggrieved that she could not speak. When she first saw the news of the audition for the female lead of Eric Williams' new film released by Firefly, she sent her information with the mentality of buying a prize. She didn't expect to receive an audition invitation. The ecstatic girl finally persuaded her old-fashioned father to come to Los Angeles alone to attend the audition. She didn't expect that the other party didn't even give her a chance to perform and rejected her. This blow made her so sad that she wanted to cry in an instant. Oh no. Eric was about to lower his head and write something, but when he saw the girl's reaction, he quickly waved his hand. "Miss Anwar, don't be like this. I'm not finished yet." The girl's tears were about to fall. When she heard Eric's words, she wiped the corners of her eyes and looked up in embarrassment. Eric gave his assistant a look, and the assistant quickly handed a box of tissues to Anwar. Carefully wiping the corners of her eyes, Gabrielle took out the makeup mirror from her bag and looked at it. Only then did she dare to look up again. "I'm sorry, Director Williams. I lost my composure. It's my fault." Eric was still afraid of the girl crying, so he quickly took the blame. "I didn't make it clear just now. I know that you're only 18 years old. It's not easy to come all the way from England to audition. Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Williams. It's like this, Miss Anwar. I just asked if you can dance the tango because you're very suitable for a role in another movie that I'm planning to make. It's starring Al Pacino. Do you know Al Pacino?" Gabrielle nodded. "Of course. I watched your movie, Knowing a Woman by Smelling Fragrance, many times in England. Mr. Pacino played the charming role of the elegant Edward." "That's good. AL's next movie lacks a tango girl role, which is also the first female lead in that movie. I liked you at first sight. If you can play that role well, I believe it will be more helpful to your career than being the female lead in my movie." Gabrielle originally came to the audition with the mentality of winning the lottery again. She had only acted in a few TV series in England, so she didn't have much hope. The reason why she broke down just now was that Eric had rejected her without warning, so she could accept it in a short time. Now that she suddenly heard this good news, the girl felt like she had fallen into a dream again. After Wind and Moon, Al once again became an A-list superstar all over the world. Gabrielle would jump for joy to be able to play a supporting role in a movie that he starred in, let alone be the first female lead. "Mr. Williams, I really don't know how to thank you," the girl said excitedly with her hands clasped in front of her chest. Eric finished writing what he wanted to write and asked his assistant to pass it to the girl. He smiled and said, "Miss Anwar, don't be happy too early. Although I do have the right to decide the role in that movie, I still have to consider the opinions of Al and the director, Mr. Martin Brest. You have about a week to prepare. If your performance is too poor, I can only say sorry." "I will definitely work hard," Gabrielle said. She took the note and looked at the string of numbers and a few messages on it. She asked, "Mr. Williams, what is this?" "UTA, oh, it's the phone number of the CEO of United Elite Agency, Mr. Capel Sid. You need to call him and ask him to arrange a temporary agent for you and help you find a dance teacher to train in the tango steps for a week. If your performance is approved by Al and Martin after a week, you will need to join UTA. Miss Anwar, are you willing?" Being able to stay in Hollywood was the dream of many foreign actors. Anwar nodded without hesitation. "Of course, I'm willing." Gabrielle Anwar was purely an accident. Eric did not have any ulterior motives for this girl who was the same age as him. It just so happened that she was originally the tango girl in Knowing Women by Scent. The tango between Anwar and Al Pacino could be said to be the highlight of Knowing Women by Scent. Since she could appear here several years in advance, it could be considered fate. Eric decided to go with the flow. The girl's performance would not disappoint him. After sending Gabrielle away, Eric opened the next document and glanced at it. Brooke Little Silk. Another legendary beauty from Hollywood. Compared to the purity of Jennifer Connelly, the beauty of Brooke Little Silk, who walked into the audition room later, was a little more fierce in Eric's eyes. However, from the sparkling eyes of the staff around him, Eric understood that Brooke Shousey, who was said to have the bloodline of nobility from 4 countries, was more in line with the Western aesthetic standards. Otherwise, she would not have been jokingly called the 8th wonder. Chapter 119. Although the 24-year-old Brooke Moss was breathtakingly beautiful, and she had acted in many movies since her debut at the age of 12, Eric didn't dare to compliment her on her glorious resume in his previous life. This great beauty was the first worst actress of the Golden Raspberry Awards after the birth of the famous Golden Raspberry Awards. After that, she had been the 2nd, 5th, and 10th Golden Raspberry Awards for Worst Actress. After that, she was nominated for the Golden Sour Plum Worst Actress of the Decade and Worst Actress of the Century. If one were to find a Hollywood actress who was as famous as Brooke Shields, only Madonna Ciccone, who had been defeated repeatedly, could be comparable to her. If it weren't for the fact that meeting girls on the bus didn't require much acting skills, Eric wouldn't even be interested in interviewing the beauty in front of him. He wasn't at the point where he would risk a big-budget movie for her beauty. Because the audition was set to be a working girl, most of the auditionees deliberately changed into the makeup of an office girl, and Brooke Shields was no exception. Therefore, Eric couldn't appreciate the girl's figure in jeans. After greeting her and chatting for a while, Eric asked, "Miss Shields, what we need is an actress with a gentler temperament, like the girl next door, but your temperament is too fierce. If you can get this role, do you mind if the makeup artist does some necessary modifications to your face?" Brooke Shields asked, "Mr. Williams, can you be more specific?" Eric looked at the girl carefully and said, "For example, your eyebrows are too thick. If they are trimmed, it will make you look softer. Of course, this is just my personal opinion. As for the specific makeup plan, we will need to listen to the professional's opinion." After hearing Eric's explanation, the girl nodded without hesitation. "No problem. If I can get the role, I am willing to listen to the makeup artist's advice and make some necessary changes." "Oh," Eric responded dispiritedly, muttering in his heart, "the publicity is all lies." Although Eric lowered his head and wrote something on the document, Brooke Shields was still keenly aware of the subtle changes in Eric's expression. She didn't know what she had done wrong, but the young director in front of her obviously didn't like her answer just now. After a moment, Eric raised his head again and said, "Then, Miss Shields, can you try a few scenes?" "Okay." Brooke Shields quickly stood up, but found that no staff member handed her the script. Eric didn't care about the girl's momentary confusion and slowly said, "Miss Shields, listen carefully. You are now Eric pondered for a moment and immediately made up a background for the role, a small staff member of an architectural design company in Los Angeles. Eric suddenly stopped and said to Alan Fissman next to him, "Alan, write down what I said." Seeing his assistant pick up a pen, Eric continued, "She is a small staff member of an architectural design company, living a boring life of 9 to 5 every day. But by chance, the girl fell in love with a mysterious man she met on a bus. After meeting him a few times, the man completely disappeared, but the girl's infatuation didn't change. She took the bus again and again, hoping to meet the mysterious man again." Eric stopped and looked at the girl standing there in a daze. Eric said, "Miss Shields, do you understand what I just said?" Brooke Shields quickly nodded. Eric pointed to the small door next to the audition room, which was a temporary small changing room, and said, "Miss Shields, the scene you have to perform is like this. After a busy day, the female lead took the bus home again, but she still didn't meet the mysterious man. Pretend that it's the door of the bus. Now, you have to get off the bus and experience the feelings of the girl when she got off the bus. I hope you can show it." Brooke Shields hesitated for a moment and asked, "Director Williams, can you be more clear?" As the girl spoke, she showed a pleading look that was hard for any man to resist. Eric's calm heart couldn't help but beat twice. He couldn't bear to make things difficult for the girl, so he said in detail, "Well, you have to show the fatigue after work, the disappointment after not meeting him again, and the loneliness of walking through the streets. That's about it." Brooke Shields didn't say anything more and obediently walked into the changing room. After a while, the door opened, and the girl walked out of the room with her head slightly lowered. Her pace was very slow, but it was obvious that she wasn't in the mood. She carefully lifted her feet as if she was walking on a tightrope. Her delicate face was tense, and only one kind of emotion could be seen. There was a distance of 7 or 8 meters from the small door of the changing room to the other wall, and Brooke Shields quickly finished walking. Moreover, the girl also knew that her performance was very bad, so she took the initiative to say, "Mr. Williams, can I try again?" "Of course." Eric nodded and made a casual gesture. Brooke Shields quickly walked back. This time, she waited for a full minute before the door of the small room opened again. Although her pace was much more relaxed this time, it was still not satisfactory. Naturally, The girl looked at Eric again. Let's do it again, Eric said. It's okay, relax. Try again. Last time was not bad. Again. Okay, I feel a little better. Relax your expression a little. Again. It was not bad, but why are you flipping your hair? You've been working all day. Do you still have the energy to care about your image? Again. Move your arms a little smaller. Don't hold the bag. Hold it in your hand. Again. In the beginning, the girl took the initiative to repeat, but after a few times, Eric seemed to have entered the director's mode. He stood up unconsciously with a paper tube in his hand, waving it and roaring. He unceremoniously ordered the girl to repeat again and again. Brooke Xiaoxi was completely shocked by Eric's momentum and almost forgot that she still had the right to refuse. After 10 times, the girl almost teared up slightly and performed according to Eric's request. After nearly 20 times, Eric saw the girl walk out of the small door with her head slightly lowered. A lock of her long hair drooped over her eyebrows. There was no longer the slightest pretense in her expression. As she walked, her whole person seemed to be floating, exuding a touch of loneliness and solitude. If Brooke Xiaoxi's previous appearance could only arouse desire, then the girl's current situation would arouse the pity and care of most men. Cut. That's great. Everyone, pay attention. Get ready for the next shot. Eric's catchphrase on set almost instinctively blurted out. Brooke Xiaoxi was stunned. Everyone else in the audition room was also stunned. Eric, who reacted almost at the same time, was also stunned. After a short silence, someone finally couldn't help but let out the first chuckle, followed by everyone else. Brooke Xiaoxi, who was standing on the other side of the wall, also burst into laughter. She covered her mouth and laughed. At the same time, the tears in her eyes because of Eric's reprimand fell without hindrance. Eric awkwardly relaxed his body and sat down. He didn't know what was wrong with him just now. Perhaps because he saw Brooke Xiaoxi's terrible acting, he involuntarily had a strong urge to pinch her. Just like some people with severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, when they saw that the fruit in the fruit platter was not arranged neatly, they would repeatedly place them in the perfect arrangement they wanted. Well, that's it, Miss Xiaoxi. You can call me Brooke, Mr. Williams. The girl sat back in the chair, bowed slightly, and took the initiative to say. Eric raised his eyebrows. Then, Brooke, that's it. You see, you still have a lot of potential. Maybe you didn't perform well in those movies before because those directors didn't want to torture you. Then, Eric, do I have hope of getting this role? The girl took the initiative to climb up to Eric's chair. Her eyes were bright as she stared at him, and the corners of her mouth curled up into an enchanting smile. I also hope you can torture me. All the staff around couldn't help but look at Eric. They didn't know what happened last night and still thought that Eric had internally selected Jennifer Connelly as the lead. Therefore, they were curious about how Eric would respond to Brooke Xiaoxi's slightly provocative words. Eric picked up the pen in his hand, twirled it twice, and nodded gently. You can go back now, Brooke. Someone will soon inform you of the good news. But you have to think about it. Although you don't have many scenes, my requirements will still be very strict. I hope that when the time comes, you won't cry like you did just now. If your crazy fans know that I made the 8th wonder of the world cry, they will kill me. Of course I won't, the girl promised happily, got up, and walked out of the audition room. Hey, Eric, what about the little beauty from yesterday? As soon as Brooke Xiaoxi left, the gossipy Nickel came up. Eric shrugged and didn't explain. Okay, let's continue with the audition. Call the next person. There were no surprises in the next audition, and Eric finally decided to cast Brooke Xiaoxi as the girl he met. After the day's work was done, the workday for the week was over. It happened to be March 17th, the first weekend of the Easter period. Many new movies were released on this day, including, of course, Mighty Dragons Killing Formation, which had undergone a series of hype. United Artists won 1,927 screens for this movie, which was dozens more than Wind and Moon, which was released more than a month ago. Previously, because it hadn't been released on a large scale, United Artists had been guiding the movie's reputation in the media, and most of them were still praises. However, after the premiere, the next day, the movie was met with almost one-sided criticism. Chapter 120. The setting of the male lead is very bizarre. He has a doctorate and is good at a very mysterious Eastern Tai Chi, but he is willing to work as a henchman in a bar. Then, the director awkwardly made him into a paranoid Avenger, but he is not a qualified Avenger. He can kill those small fries without hesitation, but he will be soft on the bully who hates him the most. In the end, he is almost killed by the other side. All in all, this is a very awkward and tangled movie. Chicago Tribune, the film is full of lawless private law enforcement, lawless destruction and unscrupulous violence. It is simply a farce. Movie Guide magazine, I only saw brawls, broken beer bottles, a group of brainless girls, and blood splattered everywhere. The plot was pale and unconvincing. Richard Gere's muscles, which were specially trained for the movie, were not interesting at all. His actions in the movie were not even as neat as those of the supporting villains. Montreal Film Magazine, a hilarious and noisy fable of the fist. Real Film Reviews, this is a movie that can completely remove the male lead, and then things will still develop according to the plot of the movie. The Double Dice Bar is rectified, which arouses the greed of the bullies. A series of violence, arson, murder, and then the town residents who can't bear it rise up and kill the bullies. Richard Gere gave up Eric Williams's Pretty Woman for such a movie. I don't know if he will lose sleep because of regret. Hollywood Information Daily, except for the rock score interspersed with it, this movie is simply nothing. Rolling Stone magazine, because of the vigorous promotion of the movie in the early stages of United Artists, the occupancy rate of Mighty Dragon Killing Formation on the first day of more than 1,900 theaters reached more than 70%, but with the one-sided bad reviews of the movie after the public release, the occupancy rate plummeted. 3 days later, the box office of the first weekend of the Easter period was released. In the 6th week of release, Pretty Woman, unsurprisingly experienced a box office reversal, earning more than $2.4 million more than last weekend. It took the first place of the 3-day weekend box office with $11.27 million. The 6-week total box office was $97.69 million. It was believed that after this week, Eric would usher in the third movie he participated in that box office exceeded $100 million. Considering that there were still a few months before Eric's 19th birthday, this result would certainly lead to another round of media hype. Although Mighty Dragon Killing Formation had nearly 2,000 screens, with a significant drop in occupancy on Saturday and Sunday, it only earned $5.25 million in the first weekend box office. Less than half of Pretty Woman was ranked second. In third place was Universal's crime comedy Fletcher's Life, which earned $5.04 million in more than 1,400 theaters. Because of Columbia's increased support and the Easter period, Home Alone unknowingly earned another $4 million in box office and steadily approached $300 million. Everyone was numb to this box office dark horse that had been at the top of the box office for 12 consecutive weeks and was still in the top 5 after 4 months of release. Maybe one day, Home Alone would suddenly accumulate $300 million in box office. When the public saw the number, they would open their eyes wide again and let out a wow. In the new week, Eric finished the casting auditions for Dark War and handed over the auditions for Island Horror and Smelling Women to the 2 directors. He then began to run around the greater Los Angeles area to select scenes for the movie. Although Dark War didn't need many scenes, there were a lot of scenes that needed to be shot with road closures. However, it wasn't easy to find a suitable location. At the same time, Eric also discovered his lack of strength. As the headquarters of Hollywood, Los Angeles had a lot of policy support for movies, but it didn't mean that the film crew could do whatever they wanted. Many scenes needed the approval of various municipal departments. Although there was a lot of flexibility, the process was very cumbersome. Moreover, the relevant connections were indispensable. Although Eric was now very famous, he couldn't compare to those famous directors and gold producers who had been famous for many years. Sometimes, Other people could get things done with just a phone call, but he had to personally communicate with them. Fortunately, Columbia attached great importance to this movie. In order to ensure that the movie could start shooting as soon as possible, they specially sent an experienced producer to assist Eric in the preparation, which greatly reduced the preparation time. While Eric was selecting scenes for Dark War, another thing happened. This storm started with Richard Gere, a former superstar who was almost 40 years old. After the box office of Wind and Moon was released on the first weekend, he started brooding about losing the male lead role in Wind and Moon. He knew that he had missed a very precious opportunity to return to the A-list superstar industry. Especially after the box office failure of Wei Long, he became even more frustrated and regretful. After Wei Long, Richard Gere desperately wanted to get another movie to make a comeback. He also felt that CAA had the responsibility and obligation to help him because they owed him. If it wasn't for Michael Ovitz's personal grudge, he wouldn't have given up the male lead role in Wind and Moon. Because of this, Richard Gere had tried many times to meet with Michael Ovitz. Unfortunately, Michael Ovitz was now busy coordinating the acquisition of Sony and Columbia after successfully pulling the strings between Sony and Coca-Cola. He didn't have time to deal with Richard Gere's small matter. He only handed the matter over to Richard Gere's agent, Horner Willie, who was seriously obsessed with cleanliness and had been instigated by Eric and Stuart Runkle to mess with him. Horner Willie recommended Richard Gere for the male lead role in a small-budget horror movie based on his current situation. Of course, Richard Gere wasn't satisfied. He had his eyes on a medium-budget movie that CAA was in charge of. Speaking of which, this request wasn't too much. But Horner Willie didn't agree to get the role for Richard Gere. He used the reason that Universal couldn't use an actor who was already at the bottom of the B-list and had just messed up a big-budget movie as a reason to reject Richard Gere. Horner Willie was one of CAA's earliest agents. Now, he was one of CAA's top agents. Even A-list actors had to treat him with respect, which slowly fueled his temper. On the other hand, Richard Gere blamed CAA for his loss. He had been holding a grudge for a long time, and when Horner Willie refused to help him get the role, he was furious that he had been cheated. Finally, he let it all out. The two of them had a big argument in Horner Willie's office. If it weren't for other people who noticed something was wrong, the two of them would have gotten into a fight. After this incident, Richard Gere left CAA on the same day. On the third day after the incident, he relied on a friend's recommendation to join another agency, William Morris Agency, WMA. This was supposed to be a normal actor job-hopping incident. Among the major agencies in Hollywood, there were countless job-hopping incidents every year. Even CAA, which claimed to have a perfect betrayal cost system, couldn't avoid it, but it was relatively rare. CAA's so-called betrayal cost system was more to prevent their own agents from starting their own companies. The 5 founders of CAA had all jumped ship from another agency. As for the big stars, it wasn't a big deal. It was easy for the top stars to leave if they wanted to. As for the second and third tier stars, as long as they were willing to pay the penalty, they could easily leave. However, CAA had a huge supply chain of film and television resources, so most stars wouldn't leave unless they were tempted enough. Also, CAA issued a strict gag order in time for the argument between Horner Willie and Richard Gere. They thought this incident would blow over unknowingly. However, they forgot that Richard Gere was also involved. Richard Gere's job-hopping quickly attracted the attention of some media outlets. In an interview with The Hollywood Information, Richard Gere, who couldn't get rid of his hatred, used the identity of a victim to viciously smear CAA's reputation. The next day, The Hollywood Information published an article with the title Interview with Richard Gere, The Inside Story of Losing the Lead of Romance. Recently, the famous actor Richard Gere, who was once expected to star in Eric Williams' box office hit, Pretty Woman, suddenly left the Creative Artists Agency, CAA, that he had worked with for a long time. In an interview with our reporter, Richard Gere finally told us the details of how he had to turn down the male lead role in Pretty Woman. The following are Mr. Richard Gere's words. When I first saw the script for Wind and Moon, I felt that it would be a wonderful story that would suit my image very well. I even made some preparations for the role. Although Eric Williams is young, I know he is a very talented young man after watching his first 2 films. However, when I was about to agree to the contract, my former agent, Horner Willie, hinted that I should turn him down. I didn't understand at the time. Then Horner Willie told me that because Eric Williams had just recruited Capel Sid, Mr. Michael Ovitz and Capel Sid had a deep conflict. That's why he didn't like his artists to work with Eric Williams. To put it bluntly, Michael Ovitz wanted to blacklist Eric Williams. However, I didn't want to give up the opportunity, so I discussed it with Horner Willie. However, I received a veiled threat. If I worked with Eric Williams, I would be blacklisted by CAA. At the time, I was at a low point in my career. Because of CAA's threat, I had no choice but to turn down the offer of Romance. Then, CAA gave me the male lead role in an action film called Way Long, in the name of appeasing the public. When I saw the script, I told Horner Willie, "No, this role doesn't suit me. Even though I've acted in action films before, this role is too violent. Maybe a muscular guy would be more suitable." But Horner Willie said that I had no other choice, so I had no choice but to accept the role of Way Long killing formation for a very low salary. In order to better match the image of the male lead in the film, I specially went through a period of high-intensity fitness. However, the film failed in the end. The reason why I expose this today is because I think CAA has forgotten their place. After monopolizing too many resources, they have become unscrupulous and do whatever they want. Some people are willing to play with an actor's future for a personal grudge and to show their power. They are willing to use other companies' investment of tens of millions as a bargaining chip. This is a very bad thing. Management companies are supposed to serve their actors. They should put the interests of their employers first. Only then can they survive in the long run. However, CAA has started to treat actors as pawns in their hands. Sooner or later, they will bring about their own destruction. Chapter 121. If Mighty Dragon Killing Formation was a fuse, then Richard Gere's interview published in the Hollywood Information Daily was the spark that ignited it. On the day the interview was published, CAA's spokesperson refuted Richard Gere's remarks as complete nonsense. He also vowed that if Richard Gere made such irresponsible remarks again, CAA would take legal action to seek justice for itself. Many people could see that Richard Gere's remarks were made out of anger. He put himself in the perspective of a victim. There were many loopholes in his remarks that could be easily pointed out by people with some industry knowledge. However, this didn't prevent the media from digging into some of the facts in his remarks. The power of gossip was strong. Thus, from the next day onwards, the media began to publish articles about the grudge between Michael Ovitz and Capel Sid. After Capel Sid left CAA, he found it difficult to make a move in Hollywood, and was almost forced to flee to Europe. This was once again exposed. Although CAA had grown into a towering tree, it wasn't without its dark history. Coupled with its forced bundling sales strategy, it was bound to cause some movies to fail. These failures were naturally dug up by the media. From mutual appreciation to falling out, the past of 2 ace agents must be told. The top 10 victims of CAA's bundling sales. A checklist of the 9 superstars that have declined after joining CAA. The black hand that made the film and television industry's costs skyrocket. A comparison of Hollywood's 10 years of film costs. The destroyer of industry rules. As more and more articles defamed CAA, a trend of demonizing CAA began unknowingly. CAA's growth over the years not only severely squeezed the survival space of other Hollywood agencies, but Michael Ovitz's bundling sales strategy also made many Hollywood studios miserable. Not only did CAA greatly increase the salaries of stars, but because of the bundling strategy, studios had to pay a lot more than their budget. The 6 major Hollywood movie giants were slightly better off. Usually, they could still get the majority of the say in the confrontation with CAA. However, the large number of second- and third-tier Hollywood movie companies, as well as independent filmmakers, were completely powerless in the face of CAA's binding strategy. They didn't have Eric's fame and confidence, so they could only obediently accept CAA's binding conditions. There were numerous agencies, a huge group of film companies, countless independent filmmakers, and finally, there was the media that was critical of CAA's bundling of TV series projects. If any of these forces were to use their power to smear CAA's reputation, CAA would be in deep trouble. Moreover, almost all of these forces were acting instinctively without any communication. Of course, it wasn't that no one supported CAA. Some actors under CAA more or less said a few good things about CAA in interviews. After all, CAA increased the production costs of the film companies, and the biggest beneficiaries were the actors. But these voices didn't cause any waves. The main reason was because the forces behind CAA deliberately played down the supportive comments of CAA's stars. Although CAA had a strong media and public relations force, it didn't have much effect in this storm. They were completely in a passive state of being scolded. Then, the executives of United Artists, who were badly battered by the box office failure of Mighty Dragon, suddenly jumped out. According to Richard Gere's interview, they blamed CAA for the failure of Mighty Dragon, and even threatened to ask for compensation. Of course, this kind of thing was impossible to succeed. United Artists just needed a scapegoat for their tens of millions of dollars of investment failure. CAA, who was at the heart of the storm, was a perfect fit. What followed was another war of words. At the same time, in the midst of this storm, several other Hollywood agencies tacitly waved their hose. In just a week, more than 20 second and third-tier actors left CAA. If this didn't cause any damage to CAA, then what happened next caused a wave of turmoil within CAA. The reason was that Tom Cruise suddenly announced that he was leaving CAA. Who was Tom Cruise? He was the most popular idol in Hollywood. Since his debut, he had never failed in any of his films. Most of the films he starred in had earned huge profits for the film company at a very low cost. The 1986 film, Top Gun, had earned $350 million at the box office worldwide with a cost of more than $10 million. The most recent movie, Rain Man, was nominated for several Oscars at the same time as it received a high box office. In the list of the most powerful people in Hollywood selected by Premiere magazine, Tom Cruise, as an actor, was among the top executives of a group of film companies, big directors, and gold producers. The departure of a beyond grade A superstar caused a wave in the industry. And Tom Cruise's departure had a lot to do with this storm. Because of this storm of demonizing CAA, after the media expressed sympathy for Richard Gere, some people turned their attention to the negotiations between the two male leads of Eric's new movie. Very soon, with the help of the media and some people, the conditions proposed by CAA were exposed. $6 million plus 20% of the profits. Only a big company, like CAA, would think of such a robbery. This is clearly a hint from CAA to make Eric Williams back off. It seems that after Wind and Moon, Mr. Michael Ovitz still can't get over the ridiculous idea of banning Eric Williams. He wants to use this unrealistic offer to ruin the cooperation between Eric Williams and Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks. What Mr. Richard Gere said not long ago, that CAA has begun to treat actors as pawns in their hands, he wasn't speaking without thinking. Actually, CAA had been constantly giving in to the negotiations regarding Cruise and Hanks' salary. Before Mighty Dragon was released, CAA asked for 12% of the profits. When the media exposed CAA's initial offer, the other party asked for 10% of the profits. Even though CAA immediately clarified that the two superstars' offer wasn't that high, the media seized on this matter and made a big deal out of it. Some analysts also expressed their opinions in the newspapers. They said that if CAA's profit-sharing model became popular, it would increase production costs and reduce profit margins. It would be even more difficult to make a profit. Under such circumstances, it would definitely affect the enthusiasm of Hollywood studios to make movies and deal a fatal blow to the rapidly recovering film industry in the United States. Some media even began to call for the federal government to investigate CAA's actions of disrupting the film industry. Under the influence of some forces, a member of the California State Assembly was interviewed by the media. He said that he might investigate CAA's offer and suspected monopolization. Although the senator quickly denied his statement, it still put a lot of pressure on CAA. What were the American industry giants most afraid of? Their number one fear was not the tax bureau, but antitrust investigations. Let's not talk about the cases of other industries for the time being. In Hollywood alone, because of the Paramount bill, the Hollywood film industry had been silent for many years. Michael Ovitz, who had left the negotiations with Sony and Columbia, returned to CAA to oversee the overall situation. In order to stabilize the situation, he personally met with Cruise and Hanks. He hoped that the two would give up on the previous profit-sharing plan and only take a portion of the film's remuneration to help CAA survive this crisis. Hanks was easy to talk to because he had never taken a share of the profits before. He had never even taken a $5 million salary. He only took $2 million for Futurama, which grossed over $100 million at the box office. He also valued his collaboration with Eric, so he agreed. Tom Cruise, on the other hand, expressed that he wanted to reconsider. The next day, Beautiful Soup and his agent, Paula Wagner, announced that they were leaving CAA. Then, they reopened negotiations with Firefly on their own. Cruise had always been an ambitious person. Coupled with the public opinion storm this time, Cruise felt like he was being manipulated by CAA like a chess piece. For a superstar who was full of energy, strong in control, and very capable, this feeling was extremely difficult to accept. In addition, because of the success of Rain Man, he saw another way, which was to cooperate with those film companies in the form of profit sharing. This could bring him more benefits, and at the same time, Cruise also hoped to gain more control of the film production. The first step for Cruise was to get rid of CAA and go solo if he didn't want to be restricted by his agency. Cruise's decision to leave CAA at this juncture was tantamount to stabbing them in the back. Chapter 122. Due to Michael Ovitz's insistence on CAA's private partnership strategy, even though CAA had developed into a giant in the industry, it wasn't listed. Therefore, even though this storm was fierce, as long as it was dealt with properly, it wouldn't cause too much substantial damage to CAA other than affecting its business for a period of time. Even if other agencies poached a bunch of B-list artists, it wouldn't affect CAA at all. Although CAA's current number of artists hadn't reached the scale of more than 6,000 in 20 years, it still had more than 1,000 artists. Losing a few dozen of them wouldn't be a big deal to CAA at all. However, in the midst of this storm, the sudden departure of a big-name star, especially one of Tom Cruise's caliber, was a completely different story. Tom Cruise's influence in the Hollywood community was huge, so his departure would definitely send a wrong signal to other superstars. Michael Ovitz's reaction was swift. On the day Cruise left, all of CAA's partners and artists received a letter personally written by Michael Ovitz. After clarifying the reason for Cruise's departure, he earnestly listed CAA's brilliant achievements over the years and the various huge changes it had brought to the actors. He hoped that they wouldn't be affected by public opinion and that CAA's future would be even more glorious. However, this letter couldn't stop the situation from worsening. Within 3 days of Tom Cruise's departure, several A-list stars left CAA for various reasons. These stars had joined CAA because of Michael Ovitz's series of measures to tie them in, which had greatly increased their income. However, with the general increase in Hollywood's income, they were able to earn high salaries even if they were with other agencies. Coupled with the panic caused by Cruise's sudden departure from CAA and the fact that someone had offered a lower commission, it was only natural that these people would leave. At the same time, more and more stars began to waver. Michael Ovitz was at his wits' end. While cursing Cruise, he had no choice but to put down his pride and personally persuade the big-name actors who wanted to leave. It had been a long time since he had done something like this. In another corner of the city, Eric, the instigator of this storm, obviously wouldn't stay out of it. This was a good opportunity to stop CAA from dominating Hollywood for the next 10 years. Eric, why are you suddenly looking for me? I'll make it clear in advance that I already have Al and the other 3 under me. This is already the limit of my ability. Don't even think about giving me more people. Kapoor rushed into Eric's office at Firefly with a flushed face. Due to the unfortunate events that had happened to CAA over the past few days, Kapoor would be lying if he said he wasn't happy. Even his bald head seemed to shine brighter. Eric leaned back in his chair and smiled. What if it's Tom Hanks? Who is it? Plus, the next 10 years would be the time when Hanks's acting career would explode. Not only would he accumulate billions of dollars in box office, but he would also become the second person to win the Oscar for Best Actor after half a century. Even though Eric said that he wasn't confident in poaching Hanks, he felt that he had a 90% chance of getting Hanks. Compared to CAA, his bargaining chip was more attractive. Okay, let's not talk about Cruise anymore. Kapoor, I actually called you here for something else. Eric took out a manuscript that he had spent a few nights writing and handed it to Kapoor. Help me take a look. What do you think of my conclusion? Kapoor took the manuscript and glanced at the title. CAA Revelation. How an Agency Giant Was Formed. Kapoor flipped open the manuscript and slowly read it. The more he read, the more serious his expression became. After he finished reading the manuscript, Kapoor slowly raised his head and looked at Eric like he was looking at a monster. The manuscript was very long. It was more than 10 pages long. It described in detail how the 5-man team at CAA had jumped ship from WMA to TV dramas and gradually developed a bundled sales system. In a short 15 years, they had formed a brand new and unique business concept. The reason why Kapoor was shocked was because, as a top agent at CAA, he could understand the contents of Eric's manuscript with a single glance. Furthermore, he had experienced most of the operations before. However, he didn't have the ability to systematically plan out these things and form a comprehensive management theory. Also, he was curious as to how Eric knew all of this. Other than Michael Ovitz's business philosophy, there was another important reason why CAA insisted on not going public. It was to prevent CAA's business strategy from being leaked. Once the company went public, they would have no choice but to disclose a large amount of CAA's information to investors. Then, CAA's business philosophy, which was more advanced than other established companies, would be easily copied by their competitors. A company's business method wasn't something that could be patented. If other agencies copied CAA, then CAA's advantage would no longer exist. Kapoor couldn't help but gulp. He carefully raised the manuscript in his hand and asked, Eric, did you write this? Yeah, I just want you to help me see if there are any mistakes. Oh yeah, Kapoor, you won't object to me publishing this, right? Kapoor quickly shook his head and smiled bitterly. If I had the ability to summarize these things, I would have published it a long time ago. Why would I wait until now? Eric, I don't understand you anymore. I can understand all the theories you said, but if you want me to end it, I don't know where to start. Eric just smiled and didn't explain. In this era, CAA's business strategy was full of mystery in the eyes of other companies. Even if other agencies poached some agents from CAA, they could only obtain incomplete information if they wanted to obtain their business strategy. However, for Eric, who came from the information age, CAA's business strategy wasn't that mysterious. In his previous life, around 1996, CAA had grown into an unshakable behemoth. It attracted the attention of a reporter. That reporter spent more than a year collecting a large amount of information before completely unveiling CAA's mystery. The public finally understood why the head of CAA, Michael Ovitz, was named the most powerful person in Hollywood. But at that time, CAA had already grown into a giant monster. Even if Michael Ovitz, who created CAA, wanted to challenge this giant monster, he would only end up defeated. CAA's agents were all parts of CAA's giant machine. They could help CAA continue to operate, but if you asked a part to explain the operating principle of this giant machine, it would be like a blind man trying to figure out an elephant. The only person who could completely explain this business theory was probably Michael Ovitz himself. Of course, now there was another person, Eric. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.